The creature moved. One moment it was on the throne. The next, it covered 60 meters in a blur of chitinous death. The Eclipse matriarch barely raised her legs defensively before Motharaxis's claws raked across her carapace. The sound, tearing metal. 4 of her legs severed clean, dropping before the abomination's claws even finished their arc. The matriarch shrieked and stumbled. Motharaxis didn't pause. Its jaws split 4 ways, impossibly wide, and clamped down on her thorax. Black saliva hissed and bubbled. The bite drained her blood at a horrifying rate. The Eclipse matriarch thrashed, frost and shadow erupting wild. She managed to stab 2 legs into Motharaxis's exposed underbelly. The impact should have pierced through. The chitinous plates shifted, flowed like liquid, reinforced the strike point. Her legs cracked against suddenly impenetrable armor. Motharaxis's tail whipped around, the 12-meter length coiling around the matriarch's body. Constricted, chitin cracked, her abdomen ruptured, spilling half-formed eggs and essence across the bone floor. She tried to deploy Twilight Weave. The webs formed, frost and shadow threads shooting toward Motharaxis. But the moment they touched its armor, the domain itself intervened. Gravity reversed, localized around each strand, pulling them away, dispersing them harmlessly. The matriarch's 8 eyes dimmed. Her mandibles twitched. Motharaxis bit down harder. The 4-way jaws closed completely. The Eclipse matriarch's head separated from her body. Eclipse matriarch has been defeated. The massive corpse dissolved into motes of frost and shadow, pulled back into the soul forge automatically upon death. The entire exchange had lasted 11 seconds. Northern stood perfectly still on his observation platform. Stone-faced, Motharaxis turned its eyeless skull toward him. Black saliva dripped from its jaws. The tail uncoiled, swaying serpent-like. A weak Belial. How uninteresting. Step forward, human. Let US play bite and chew. Northern's eyes tracked the movement, analyzed the speed, cataloged the adaptive armor response, noted the domain interference patterns. Easy to defeat the apex Belial himself, but what good would that do? Maybe it was the pride of a master, but he wanted a different result this time. He didn't want to have to do it. He wanted the matriarch to grow. Aoi. Resummon. That entity just suffered catastrophic. Resummon. You're using echo summoning. The Eclipse matriarch reformed. Whole. Undamaged. But her eyes held something they hadn't before, memory of death. Motharaxis's head tilted. Interest flickered through the domain. Again? Again. This time the matriarch attacked first. She'd learned, don't let it close the distance. Twilight we've deployed in layers, creating a 3-dimensional maze between her and Motharaxis. Motharaxis's body changed mid-charge. The sharp, angled, lithe frame suddenly swelled, bulk increasing, durability maximizing. It crashed through the webs like cobwebs, black armor plates shedding the frost shadow threads. The matriarch tried a different approach. Dual nature manifestation, splitting into Frost Weaver and Shadow Spinner, attacking from 2 angles simultaneously. Motharaxis's response was immediate. His body phased, became intangible for 5 seconds. Both attacks passed through harmlessly. When it solidified, it was already moving, claws raking through the Frost Weaver's legs. The Shadow Spinner tried to capitalize, wrapping shadow threads around Motharaxis's arms. For a moment, the restraint held. Then Motharaxis pulled. The domain's gravity shifted, amplifying its physical strength tenfold. The Shadow Spinner was yanked forward, directly into those waiting jaws. The bite was surgical. One snap, the Shadow Spinner's head crushed. Both forms collapsed simultaneously. Eclipse matriarch has been defeated. Again. You're using echo summoning. Oh human. How arrogant. The matriarch had learned not to split against the phase shift. Had learned to anticipate the gravity manipulation. But Motharaxis adapted faster. The battle intensified. From 11 seconds to 20 whole seconds. Both masses slamming against each other at horrifying speed. Twilight matriarch was matching the creature's pace now. Surprisingly. Northern sat lotus-style on one of the massive skulls, watching the battle carefully, calculating just how intelligent Echoes could be. He watched to see if Twilight Matriarch noted her mistakes and fixed them the next time she was summoned. The battle stretched and intensified until Motharaxis itself seemed to reach some threshold. It tore away from Twilight Matriarch and unleashed a hollow, terrifying roar. The roar enveloped everything for one heavy beat, then fell into absolute silence. Northern's brow furrowed. Why does that sound like a call for backup? Because it is. However, all the monsters in the upper rings have been destroyed. He exhaled. Good thing I descended layer after layer instead of just jumping down. Motharaxis's skull turned, scanning the empty passages. For the first time, something like surprise rippled through the domain. Northern's voice echoed from his platform. Dead. Every last one. No one's coming to save you, buddy. You. Me. Motharaxis's attention shifted fully to Northern for the first time. Really looked at him. Not just prey, a threat. The domain contracted. The walls closed in. Gravity intensified. The essence drain tripled. And Motharaxis attacked with genuine killing intent. The matriarch lasted 47 seconds. Eclipse Matriarch has been defeated. Again. The matriarch was learning language. Between resurrections, between deaths, something was building in her consciousness. She deployed Twilight Weave not as barriers but as sensors. The threads spread across the entire chamber, vibrating with each movement, feeding her information about spatial distortions, gravity shifts, essence flows. When Motharaxis phased, she felt the essence expenditure before it happened. When it shifted forms, she sensed the restructuring of soul cores. She lasted for minutes. Eclipse Matriarch has been defeated. Motharaxis stood over the dissolving corpse, his head tilted. Learning? Interesting. Again. Twilight Matriarch took another approach. This time she stopped trying to overpower it. Instead, she danced. 8 legs carrying her across walls, ceiling, floor. She wove webs not to trap, but to create terrain advantages. She split and merged her forms not as attacks, but as feints. Motharaxis pursued relentlessly, but for the first time it couldn't land an immediately fatal blow. The matriarch managed to wound it, frost threads finally penetrating between armor plates, shadow essence corroding the exposed underbelly. Motharaxis's regeneration activated instantly. The wounds sealed, but it had felt pain. His form shifted again. A body manufactured for one purpose, pure speed. It blurred across the chamber and drove its claws through all 8 of the matriarch's eyes simultaneously. Eclipse Matriarch has been defeated. Again. The matriarch's voice dropped, shedding its childlike lilt. You control the domain, but the domain is still space, and space can be divided. She deployed Twilight Weave in a configuration Northern had never seen, not a web but a structure. A framework that subdivided the chamber into smaller cells, each one isolated from the domain's direct influence. Motharaxis tried to reshape the terrain. The bone floor wouldn't respond, the webs choked its connection to the domain. For 10 seconds it was just physical combat. No domain powers, no reality warping. The matriarch held her own. Barely. Her paradox state activated, existing as frost and shadow simultaneously. Motharaxis's adaptive armor struggled to counter contradictory damage types applied at once. Then Motharaxis roared. The sound shattered the web structure. The sonic blast ruptured the matriarch's internal organs, destabilized her paradox state, forced her frost and shadow halves to reject each other violently. She exploded from internal contradiction. Eclipse Matriarch has been defeated, but she'd isolated it from its domain. Proven it wasn't invincible. Again. Attempt 137. Motharaxis wasn't adapting anymore. It was learning. It began predicting the matriarch's tactics. When she tried to isolate portions of the chamber, it obliterated the web framework before it could solidify. When she split into dual forms, it targeted the spatial connection between them, forcing a premature merge. The matriarch responded by doing something new. She started spawning offspring not as weapons, but as extensions of her sensory network. Hundreds of small frost shadow spiders spreading across the chamber, each one a node in a greater consciousness. Through them, she achieved omnidirectional awareness. She could see Motharaxis from every angle simultaneously. It wasn't enough. Motharaxis phased through her swarm and materialized directly inside her abdomen, inside her body. Its claws ripped outward from within. Eclipse Matriarch has been defeated. Again. The chamber was different. 16 hours of continuous combat had warped even this reality-broken space. The bone floor bore frost patterns seared into its surface. Shadow stains marked every wall. The air itself remembered violence. Northern had been sitting for 16 hours. Watching, analyzing, resummoning. Motharaxis looked different too. Its armor plates regenerated slower. The adaptive responses came fractionally delayed. Not weakness, but the first signs that even an apex Belial had limits. The Eclipse Matriarch reformed. But this time, she was different. Her carapace bore patterns that hadn't existed before, scars that persisted across resurrections, etched into her very essence. Her 8 eyes burned with a malevolent light that radiated understanding and purpose. She said nothing. Words were unnecessary now. Motharaxis shifted immediately to a Leviathan form, manufactured purely for maximum combat strength. It recognized the change in her. They collided. The matriarch didn't try to isolate the domain this time. She used it. When Motharaxis manipulated gravity, she let it pull her, then deployed webs at the apex of the motion, using the domain's own power to accelerate her strikes. When it phased, she didn't attack where it was. She attacked where the domain's essence flow indicated it would resolidify. Her claws waited when it became tangible again. When it roared, she'd already spawned offspring inside her own body, used them as internal armor to absorb the sonic damage. Motharaxis adapted, shifted to the Devourer. Pure speed. The matriarch split into Frostweaver and Shadow Spinner. But this time, she didn't split spatially. Both forms occupied the same space. A true paradox that even Motharaxis's domain couldn't resolve. Its claws passed through the Shadow Spinner and struck the Frostweaver. The Frostweaver shattered, but Reformation pulled essence from the Shadow Spinner. They were one entity existing as two states. Destroying one meant fighting both. Motharaxis's adaptive armor tried to respond to frost damage, tried to respond to shadow damage. The conflicting adaptations created a feedback loop, armor plates hardening and softening simultaneously, unable to resolve the contradiction. The matriarch struck. Her paradox claws, existing as both frozen matter and corroding shadow, pierced through the confused armor and sank into Motharaxis's chest. For the first time in 16 hours, the ancient Belial staggered. It responded with devastating force. Its tail coiled around both her forms, constricting. Its jaws clamped down on her merged consciousness. Black saliva burned, essence drained. But the matriarch had learned the most important lesson. She wasn't trying to win by overpowering it. She was trying to win by outlasting it. Every second Motharaxis spent regenerating was a second it wasn't adapting. Every adaptation to her contradictory nature was processing power not spent predicting her movements. She didn't need to kill it in one strike. She needed to kill it in 10,000 strikes. Her offspring, still spawning despite the damage, began doing something new. Instead of attacking, they wove webs that connected to the paradox state of her body. Each thread anchored her existence, preventing complete dissolution even as Motharaxis tore chunks from her form. She became unkillable through distributed existence. As long as one spider lived, she could reform, and she was spawning faster than Motharaxis could destroy them. The ancient Belial recognized the strategy. It tried to crush all the offspring simultaneously, reformed into the Leviathan, used the domain's gravity to pull everything toward its maw at once. The matriarch let it. Let herself and all her spawn be drawn into that spiral of teeth. And at the moment of consumption, she detonated her paradox state. Frost and shadow, contradiction and impossibility, all released at once inside Motharaxis's body. The explosion was soundless. Reality didn't break. It inverted. For one impossible moment, everything in the chamber existed in reversed causality. Effects preceded causes. Death came before the killing blow. Motharaxis's regeneration tried to activate. But regeneration requires causality. Tissue reforms after damage occurs. In reversed causality, the damage occurred after reformation, meaning it was reforming into an already dead state. The ancient Belial's body locked. Its adaptive armor seized. This phase shift failed mid-activation, leaving it half-tangible. The Eclipse matriarch reformed from the distributed network of surviving offspring. She was barely coherent, far less than flesh. But she had one attack left. She drove all 8 legs into Motharaxis's frozen form, through the confused armor, through the half-phased flesh, directly into its heart. Motharaxis's body convulsed. Its form shifted rapidly, devourer to tyrant to leviathan and back, unable to stabilize. The domain flickered, reality stabilizing and destabilizing in waves. The ancient Belial's consciousness pulsed one final message into the domain. How? The Eclipse matriarch, dissolving into motes of frost and shadow, spent her last coherent thought on an answer. Learned. From you. Adaptation. Through. Consumption. Consumed. Your death. 158 times. Until. I understood. Motharaxis's body collapsed. The chitinous armor cracked apart. The remaining 7 soul cores, distributed throughout the canyon, began to pulse erratically, trying to resurrect their master. But Northern was already moving. You're using Eclipse Step. He vanished from his platform, appearing at Ring 5. His hand touched the Crimson Bulwark's ruins. You're using Thread Severance. Invisible threads found the 5th soul core embedded in the Fortress Stone and severed its connection to the Resurrection Network. He stepped again. Ring 4. Ring 3. Ring 2. Ring 1. Each time, thread severance. Each time, another core isolated. By the time Motharaxis's consciousness tried to reconstitute itself, 6 of its 8 cores were offline. Only the 8th core remained, buried in the depths of the canyon, merged with the earth itself. Northern stepped into that impossible space and found it. A pulsing mass of crystallized hunger, buried in the earth's crust. He placed his hand on it. You're using absolute lock. The core froze. All functions ceased. The resurrection stopped. Above, in the heart, Motharaxis's body went completely still. The domain shuddered. The walls stopped breathing. The gravitational pull began to fade. After 300 years of dominance, the endless maw fell silent. You have slain an apex Belial, Motharaxis. You have gained 264 talent fragments. Northern stood in the deep core, surrounded by dying dimensional distortions. The Eclipse matriarch's final remnants dissolved back into the Soul Forge. She died on attempt 159, but she'd won. Aoi. Store her with special designation. She earned it. Eclipse matriarch stored with honors. Combat record: 158 defeats, 1 victory. Evolution status: proven. Current talent fragments: 2,890. Northern exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of 16 hours of continuous combat analysis lifting from his shoulders. Now, let's see what 300 years of adaptive consumption tastes like. He stepped back to the heart, where Motharaxis's corpse waited, and began the copying process. Northern stood over Motharaxis's corpse, hand hovering above the chitinous armor. Around him, the domain was dying. The walls had stopped pulsing. The gravitational distortions were fading. Reality was slowly knitting itself back together. Aoi. Begin analysis. Analyzing defeated entity. Motharaxis data processing. Warning. This entity is significantly more complex than previous copies. Estimated time to full analysis: 3 hours, 47 minutes. Northern settled into a seated position on a bone platform, hands still pressed against the corpse. Take your time. I want everything. The analysis began. Through Shingen's layers, Northern watched the essence patterns unravel, the adaptive armor mechanisms, the form-shifting biology, the phase capabilities, the regeneration framework tied to distributed soul cores. All of it mapped, cataloged, understood. Analysis 34% complete. But something was wrong. Analysis 34% complete. The percentage wasn't moving. Aoi! There's a problem. What kind of problem? I can analyze the body, the abilities, the biological structures. But there's something else. Northern's eyes narrowed. The domain. Yes, Motharaxis and the Endless Maw are not separate entities. They are one existence expressed across two states, physical form and environmental manifestation. Copying the form without the domain would be like copying half a person. So copy both. We don't know if that's possible. A corrupted domain is a Belial rank phenomenon. You're not. I said copy both. This could have severe consequences. Noted. Proceed. There was a long pause. Then, expanding analysis parameters. New target. Corrupted domain. The Endless Maw. Warning. This will require significant essence expenditure. Warning. Unknown interactions with Soul Forge possible. Warning. You may experience dimensional instability. Do it. Analyzing. Physical structure complete. Analyzing. Ability framework complete. Analyzing. Essence signature complete. Analyzing. Soul pattern complete. Analyzing. Form adaptation matrix complete. Analyzing. Distributed core network complete. Analyzing. Corrupted domain structure. Northern felt it. Not pain pressure. His soul forge, that 5 square kilometer internal dimension, suddenly resonated. Like a tuning fork struck by something vast. Analyzing. Environmental warping mechanisms. The pressure intensified. Northern's essence reserves began to drain. Not slowly, but in a hemorrhage. 1%, 5%, 15%. Analyzing. Reality distortion patterns. 30%. Aoi. How much essence is this going to take? Unknown. The domain is 6 kilometers deep, 15 kilometers in diameter. We're trying to copy an entire self-sustaining ecosystem and reality-warped space. 45%. Northern's vision blurred. His body swayed. Analyzing. Spatial folding architecture. 60%. Keep going. Analyzing. Gravitational anchoring system. 75%. Northern's hand trembled against Motharaxis's corpse. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His soul forge was stretching. He could feel it expanding, trying to accommodate something far larger than it should be able to contain. Analyzing. Monster integration network. 88%. Warning. Critical essence levels. Warning. Soul forge structural strain detected. Almost there. Don't stop. Analyzing. Core distribution matrix. 93%. Then something broke. Not in Northern. In the space around him. The dying domain, the fading Endless Maw, suddenly surged. Almost as if it recognized what was happening. It recognized that something was trying to claim it, consume it, understand it completely. And it didn't want to be understood. The chamber convulsed. The bone lattice shattered. Gravity reversed, tripled, vanished, returned. The walls folded inward and outward simultaneously. Reality fractured into contradictory states. Warning. Domain is resisting analysis. Warning. Hostile takeover attempt detected. Northern's eyes widened. It's alive. Not alive, aware. The domain retained a fragment of Motharaxis's consciousness. It's trying to enter your soul forge as a hostile entity. 98% essence. Northern could barely move. The domain was collapsing inward, trying to pull him into itself, trying to become his internal dimension, trying to replace his soul forge with itself. A hostile takeover from a dying god. Through the chaos, through the dimensional collapse, Northern forced himself to focus. Shingon activated all 3 layers simultaneously. You're using third eye. You're using flow perception. You're using causality fracture. He saw it. The domain's core logic. The fundamental pattern that made it function. And he saw the flaw. It was trying to survive by consuming him. But it was weakened, dying, desperate. Couldn't consume something infinite. Northern's consciousness expanded into his soul forge. And through the soul forge he pulled. Not pushing the domain away, pulling it in. But not as a hostile invader. As raw material. The Endless Maw tried to resist. Tried to maintain coherence. But Endless didn't just copy, it multiplied. It took one thing and made it infinite through iteration. The domain was pulled into the soul forge. And the moment it crossed that threshold, infinite iteration activated. Emergency protocol. Endless integration. Corrupted domain detected within soul forge. Applying infinite iteration. Creating iteration. Version 1.0. Creating iteration. Version 1.1. Creating iteration. Version 1.2. Creating iteration. Version 847.3. The domain was copied, shattered, reformed, multiplied, evolved, and integrated 847 times in 3 seconds. By the end, nothing remained of the original consciousness. Only the structure, the mechanism, the pure, distilled concept of a reality-warping environmental manifestation. Stripped of malevolence, reduced to function, analysis complete, form acquired, Motharaxis, apex Belial. All 3 forms stored, the Devourer, the Tyrant, the Leviathan, all combat abilities stored, distributed core network, stored, corrupted domain acquired, the Endless Maw prototype, Soul Forge evolution triggered, Northern collapsed to his knees, gasping. His essence reserves, 2%. But his Soul Forge status, evolved. Size, 70 square kilometers, expanded from 50 square kilometers. New feature, corrupted domain integration prototype, new capability. Environmental warping, limited. New capability, gravitational manipulation, internal only. Time flow, 115, unchanged. Reality stability, 97%, decreased from 100%. Side effect of domain integration. What just happened? You copied a corrupted domain, and instead of it consuming you, Endless consumed it. Your Soul Forge isn't just a storage dimension anymore. It's becoming something else. Something that can warp reality within its boundaries. Northern slowly stood, checking his body. Everything intact. No corruption. No hostile consciousness trying to puppet him. And Motharaxis's form? Fully copied. You can transform into any of its 3 configurations. You have access to all its abilities, including the distributed core resurrection, though that only functions within a domain you control. So if I'm in my Soul Forge, you would be functionally unkillable. Yes. Northern looked down at Motharaxis's corpse. It was dissolving now, not into motes of light like his echoes, but simply crumbling to dust. The original was gone. Only the copy remained, stored within Northern. What about endless multiplication? Infinite iteration activated during the copying process. Creating variants. Variant 1. Radiant Sovereign light-based version. Purification instead of consumption. Variant 2. Dark Colossus pure darkness. Enhanced reality warping. What about its echo? Unknown. An echo of an apex Belial with domain control abilities. I genuinely don't know what would happen. It might create a localized reality bubble wherever the echo manifests. It might be completely unstable. We would need to test carefully. Northern nodded slowly, still recovering. Around him, the chamber was stabilizing. The region of death was becoming just a canyon again. Deep, dangerous, but no longer reality warped. The Endless Maw had been consumed, copied, integrated. And in doing so, Northern had taken the first step towards something unprecedented. Aoi. Theoretical question. Yes. If I can copy one corrupted domain, what happens when I copy more? Could my Soul Forge integrate multiple domain types? That's a terrifying question, but possible? Theoretically, if you defeated higher rank entities with corrupted domains, if you survived the integration process each time, if your Soul Forge could handle the conflicting reality structures, then yes, theoretically possible, you could become a walking dimensional nexus, a living space that contains multiple incompatible realities simultaneously. Northern's smile was sharp despite his exhaustion. Good to know. He exhaled. Now, let's go and see what Mother and Father have been up to while I was preventing their world from destruction. As the canyon stabilized, Northern walked out of it. Before the stabilization, under Mothraxis's rule, it had been a reality-warping terrain designed to trap people in the maws of death, where even if they didn't die from other monsters, they die from simply existing in the canyon. The thing was a layered belly of digestion, and the bastard monster had infused each layer with its core. Northern's analysis of the terrain revealed that Mothraxis had been feeding on every monster in the canyon. That was why their life cycles were short and they were always reproduced again. Really a disturbing monster, honestly. The canyon finally gave way to an open region, and he stepped out. Beyond it stretched a field of brown grass or something that looked like wheat. He stood amidst it, casting his perception abilities to note where the others were. Since he was currently low on essence, he had to be careful with expenditure. In the sky, he could see the threatening storm of the Thunderhead Dreadnought, slowly approaching. Looks like he's managed to locate me. Northern's head turned. As for those other two, how'd they end up so far away? Northern could sense Escadar and Chris's location. Both seemed to have emerged from a different end of the canyon. They seemed fine, and his two echoes were still with them. He considered dismissing them for the sake of essence expenditure but decided against it. The coast wasn't clear. The next moment, though, Northern's brow furrowed. His two echoes vanished, barely a second after he'd been thinking about this. Not only that, he'd been surrounded in a single moment. The afternoon was sharp, the day star cool and pouring down with vigor. It was a new year, after all. In this brown meadow it didn't look it, though. Everywhere was clear and stagnant, oblivious to the celebration of seasons. And even though Northern's face had hardened, surrounded as he was, any journeyer with him would have thought he was being paranoid, because he still stood alone in the brown field. Northern looked at his hands. I'll have to move my hands and legs because of low essence. To think I just said I could never get low on essence. Analyzing the corrupted domain took more than I calculated, and the Broodmother's catacombs caused significant essence loss as well. Right now, your essence is at 10%. How long until 100? At least 1 hour. Northern's head dipped in relief. Then he glanced forward and raised his chin. I didn't come to fight anyone. I came to see my mother and my father. I wish to be taken to them. Based on how Shin made it sound, there shouldn't be any cause for aggression. Northern stood there, arms raised. Then men in lusterless black armor and gray capes materialized from thin air. Each held a greatsword nearly their own height, imposing blades that looked like they could shatter massive rocks with a careless swing. The knights approached cautiously. One seized Northern's hands, bringing them behind his back. A black metal ring slipped over his clasped wrists. Immediately the ring grew like a disease and spread, covering his entire arms in a lattice of black shackles. Analyzing. One of the knights peered at Northern through dark, hollow eyes. We will escort you. Northern's lips curved. No problem. But wait. I really don't like getting bound. Can you help me? You know what? I'll just do it myself. Don't want to stress esteemed knights like you. As he spoke, he tore his hands free from the strange shackles. The thing reverted to its original form, just a simple ring, and clinked against the ground. Northern massaged his wrists, his expression harmless. I think those few seconds already gave me an allergic reaction. TSK. Still smiling. Is it okay if I go with you unbound? The knight who'd spoken earlier looked at the others behind Northern. Something like fear and confusion flickered in the glance. Northern's smile widened. I promise I won't cause a nuisance. Shin is my father. The knight exhaled. Okay. Oh, and please, my subordinates. I believe they're in your custody. 2 of them. They're my subordinates, so I'd like to see them later. The knight's thick voice rumbled out. After you're cleared. Northern shrugged and followed the knights. They passed a small settlement, mostly cottage designs built sparsely around a river system. They passed through and soon navigated winding cliffs, then arrived at a haven of enormous castles built into large, tall cliffs. The clan's architecture gleamed ancient gold. Northern's gaze swept over the cliff-face castles as they walked, his mind automatically cataloging the engineering marvel before him. To carve structures this size directly into solid rock, the excavation alone would be astronomical. In his previous life, he'd studied methods for underground construction, tunneling, shaft sinking, rock bolting. But those were for mines, subways, bunkers. These were entire fortresses hollowed from mountain faces. The precision required to maintain structural integrity while removing that much material, to ensure the remaining rock could bear the weight of additional structures built atop the carved spaces. His eyes traced the flowing lines where castle met cliff, noting how the architecture seemed to grow organically from the stone rather than simply being carved into it. No visible stress fractures, no signs of settling or collapse despite what must be centuries of weathering. They'd need either incredibly advanced cutting technology, which shouldn't exist in a world like this, or something else entirely. But then, there were people with unique utility talents. I certainly don't miss being an engineer. They came to a stop. Northern halted his thoughts, glancing around. A large contingent of knights moved through the area. If Northern didn't know better, he'd say they looked like they'd just taken a beating. Their movements were stiff, their formations loose, shoulders sagging beneath armor that suddenly looked too heavy. They must have been attacked by monsters too. Khal's strategy was to distract every nation, especially those with paragons, to break communication. So they could be. Northern's eyes narrowed. Nah, something's definitely wrong. I'm getting a bad feeling. His gaze sharpened. I will run a wide-scope analysis of the entire mountain range. His brow furrowed. There'll be no need for that. A group of knights in large jagged armor and tattered capes that flowed like shadows even in the clear afternoon walked toward them, making Northern's escort stop in their tracks. What do you have with you? One of the approaching knights asked, his voice sounding as if from a metallic chamber. The lead knight escorting Northern bowed. Claims to be Shin's son. The air shifted. The approaching knight's gaze snapped to Northern, then back to the knight who'd brought him. We'll take him directly to the Patriarch. The new knight's armor bore different markings, probably indicating higher ranks than those at the entrance. The lead knight who'd brought Northern stepped closer to the other knight and whispered. The recipient's eyes widened behind his helmet, then narrowed the next moment. His posture stiffened as he studied Northern. He approached Northern. We will take you directly to the Patriarch. Northern exhaled, then nodded. He switched teams immediately, and they entered a shadow-draped cavern with winding stairs that curled around the mountain's interior. After a while, they emerged onto the castle's balcony. Northern glanced down at half the mountain expanse stretching below. As they reached an entrance, a boy with tousled black hair and a scar slashing across one cheek waited for them. His weathered face bore a stern expression that cracked into a wry smile as Northern drew closer. The knight bowed and stepped back. Northern regarded the young man, chin slightly raised. The young man returned the inspection, his smile practiced. You look nothing like your father. Northern's tone remained level. Sometimes the apple falls very far from the tree. The young man sighed and opened the door, walking into the vast expanse wreathed in darkness. Northern entered behind him. He glanced left, then right. Darkness blanketed the entire space, perfectly concealing the presence of others. But with eyes of the shadow, Northern's sight was far sharper in darkness than in light. They didn't need the dramatics. He could already see them from miles away. He stood for a few moments, then exhaled. Okay, I think we've come far enough, right? So at least before you begin, can you tell me what you all did with Shin and my mother? Another sigh escaped the young man. I told father this was a pointless charade. If you walked here through the canyon, then you're undoubtedly among the most skilled of us. Perhaps you have a darkness ability too. It's simply a nightmare to pass through that place unless one has an ability that renders them non-existent in darkness. Northern remained silent, studying the young man. Recognition flickered across his face. Oh, wait. No, you have it wrong. The Kageyama Scion's eyes widened slightly. The others emerged from the shadows. A tall guy with a massive physique, another with a lithe build, a girl in a black dress and lady's hat as if preparing for a ball with the undead, and another woman who looked rough-edged, with short black hair reaching just to her shoulders. What do you mean? Northern swept his gaze over all of them before locking eyes with the boy directly before him. I didn't sneak through the canyon. He scoffed incredulously. Dear stars, the thought of sneaking at this stage of my life sounds so preposterous. What would the point of all the struggle before now be? The absurdity of it pulled a laugh from him. He let it fade before meeting the Kageyama Scion's stares. I destroyed it, killed the monsters, destroyed the Motharaxis or whatever it's called. The guy's eyes widened, then narrowed. The next second, laughter burst from him, wild, disbelieving. His brothers and sisters chuckled quietly, all except one. The lady in the dress glanced at the tall, lithe young man with black hair cascading to his upper back, the one who wasn't laughing. What is it, first brother? Don't tell me you're still displeased about that. The young man exhaled, crossing to his brother standing before Northern. His hand found his brother's shoulder. Jiang. He's not lying. Jiang's head turned slightly. You shouldn't be doing this, elder brother. He exhaled again. Jiang. Spread your shadow awareness. The canyon feels different. Jiang froze. His eyes closed. The canyon was something they'd lived with all their lives. It felt as familiar as a house they'd lived in for 20 years. While the change was easy to miss through carelessness, it was equally easy to sense once you looked. Jiang's eyes flew open. What? Another voice murmured from behind. It's vague, but certainly different. This different they spoke of could be considered normal. After all, the canyon had been abnormal their entire lives. Every gaze lifted to Northern, who stood with his hands clasped behind his back. As their stunned expressions locked on him, he flashed a smile. So, where are my parents? The tall, lithe man stepped forward, closing the distance. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with a depth in his eyes that was almost unsettling, the kind that spoke of unwavering kindness. My name is Kai. I'm the firstborn of... Brother, don't you dare. Jiang's scream tore through the space. His teeth ground together, eyes crinkling with anguish. What the hell do you think you're doing? These people killed Yun. Kai stopped, his fist clenched. It has nothing to do with Uncle Shin. Don't be naive. It has everything to do with him. The sudden instability, the monster invasion, the intruders claiming to search for their own while besieging our castle. My brother is dead because of them. Jiang advanced, his glare burning into Northern. A dagger materialized in his grip, its point stabbing toward Northern's face. And then this one conveniently walks in. You think some cheap trick with canyon monsters will make me wary? I don't believe you. Those monsters, especially from the third layer down, can never be defeated. Every patriarch tried until the 19th, and it always meant their death. People who became paragons, luminaries. And here you come, claiming to have slaughtered them all. You don't even look like a sage. Northern's gaze swept over them, bored. He exhaled. Oh well, where are my parents? Northern's gaze was blank, a mask of stone, even as he asked them for the whereabouts of his parents. His question landed like a weight. The air thickened, shoulders tensed. Jiang's chin lifted, the dagger in his hand catching the light. You want to get your father so badly? Then you'll have to cross us. Northern scanned them. One by one, they summoned their weapons after Jiang. The young lady in the dress, a scythe. The tall one, twin sickles with thin chains dangling from their hilts. Kai's hands trembled as he drew two long swords. All four pairs of eyes glowered with coordinated darkness. Northern exhaled and shook his head. Fatal mistake. What do you know? Just like our brother did. Jiang shot forward, spiral darkness erupting behind him and catapulting his speed tenfold. Tenfold to Northern was still slow motion. Jiang's dagger thrust toward Northern's throat. The blade wreathed in writhing shadow that extended its reach by 3 feet. Northern's head tilted left. The shadow blade passed through empty air. Jiang pivoted, his form dissolving into dark mist. He reappeared at Northern's right flank, dagger descending. You are using flow perception. Northern saw the trajectory before the blade moved, the momentum, the weight distribution, the killing intent concentrated in that single point. He stepped back. Chains rattled. May's sickles came from both sides, the chains extending impossibly as shadows coiled around them. The weapons curved through the air like striking serpents, aimed at Northern's neck and waist simultaneously. Northern dropped low. The sickles met above him with a metallic shriek, but the chains wrapped, forming a cage. May yanked. The cage constricted. A scythe blade materialized from the darkness beneath Northern's feet. Ayam rose from his own shadow, black dress billowing like funeral shrouds, the massive scythe arcing upward to bisect him from groin to crown. Northern's hand shot down, catching the scythe's shaft. The weapon stopped. Behind her veil, Ayam's red eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. Darkness erupted from the scythe blade, crawling up Northern's arm like living decay. You are using Sun's legacy, Pyreheart Ascendant. Northern poured a sliver of essence into the talent ability, activating it halfway. Heat exploded from his palm. The darkness recoiled, hissing as it burned away. Ayam released the scythe and melted back into shadow, reforming 10 feet away. Kai's twin longswords cut through the space where Northern stood, one high and one low, perfectly coordinated to leave no escape. But Northern was already moving. He released the scythe and spun, his body flowing between the blades with surgical precision. Neither touched cloth nor skin. As he turned, he saw it. Their coordination. Jiang didn't just attack, he created openings. His strikes forced movement, herding Northern into killing zones. May's chains weren't meant to bind. They were spatial control, cutting off escape routes while channeling him toward Ayam's ambushes. Ayam emerged from shadows at mathematically perfect angles, her scythe always positioned where Northern's momentum would carry him. And Kai didn't just swing swords. Every strike was set up for the next sibling's attack. His blades positioned to block counters or force defensive choices that exposed new vulnerabilities. Is this why they're so dangerous together? They work like parts of a whole. Impossible to be so unified while different. It wasn't 4 people fighting. It was one organism with 8 limbs, all working in perfect synchronization. Northern's lips curved slightly. Not bad. Jiang materialized directly behind him, dagger aimed at his spine. But 2 more Jiangs appeared simultaneously from other shadows, attacking from different angles. Northern's eyes widened for a heartbeat, but Shingon analyzed it instantly. While it resembled Shin's ability, it wasn't a talent ability at all. It was a heritage ability, something personal they'd unlocked through synergic combat over time. Phantom copies through shadow teleportation. May's sickles came again, but this time she didn't aim at Northern. She aimed at the spaces between shadows, severing his escape routes. The darkness beneath Northern's feet rippled. Ayam was coming again. Kai's swords descended from above in a perfect cross-slash, the blades humming with shadow-cutting essence that split the air itself. They descended like a flock of crows, locking him into a murder formation. 4 blades, 1 killing intent. Even Kai, hands steady now, had set aside whatever doubts plagued him earlier. You are using Eclipsing Dread, Eclipse Step. Northern dissolved into shadow. He reformed 20 feet away, standing atop a pillar of darkness he'd summoned instantly. All 4 Kageyama landed where he'd been, their attacks converging on empty space with such precision the stone floor cracked in a perfect X pattern. They repositioned immediately. No hesitation, no confusion, just fluid transition into the next formation. A new talent has been detected. Spectra Domain, Class B. Do you want to copy talent Spectra Domain? B class for 5,000 talent fragments. Nah, useless. I already have a better shadow ability. Can't be greedy and have it all. Well, not yet. Zhang's domain expanded, his shadows flooding the chamber. Within seconds, every corner was his territory. May cut her own palm. Blood crystallized into throwing knives that she hurled not at Northern, but at strategic points around the room, creating blood markers. Do you want to copy talent? Bloodless C-class for 4,000 talent fragments. I am saying. Not with her voice but with her scythe as it carved through wind in a complicated pattern. A requiem that made the air heavy, oppressive. The boundary between life and death thinned. Do you want to copy talent Eclipse of the Dying Moon? S-class for 10,000 talent fragments. Northern's jaw dropped. Hey! Why did it jump to 10,000 for S-class? How much then is SS, SSS, and EX? The potency of your soul. Yeah, I know. Kai's swords began to glow with ethereal light, each swing leaving trails that remained in the air, cutting lines that didn't fade. Do you want to copy talent Umbral Severance? A shadow-based cutting ability, A class for 6,000 talent fragments. A cold smile graced Northern's lips. Are these guys setting up a kill box for me? Northern observed as Zhang's shadow domain gave them perfect awareness of his position. May's blood markers would allow her to teleport her weapons anywhere in the chamber. Iam's requiem was sapping his essence regeneration, making prolonged combat disadvantageous. And Kai's persistent cutting lines were creating a maze of unavoidable damage zones. In another 10 seconds, the trap would be complete. Northern exhaled. I'm looking for my parents. I don't have time for this. Then die quickly. Zhang screamed. All four moved as one. Zhang teleported through shadows in rapid succession, appearing and vanishing in microsecond intervals, each appearance accompanied by a dagger wreathed in killing intent. May's sickles multiplied. Blood from her markers formed dozens of crimson blades that shot toward Northern from every angle, each one aimed at vital points. Iam stepped from shadow to shadow, her scythe leaving trails of death energy that corroded anything they touched. Where she passed, stone itself began to decay. Kai's swords created a storm of cutting lines, each slash perfectly coordinated with his siblings' attacks to eliminate any defensive option. Perfect synchronization, perfect execution, perfect coordination. Northern stood still. You are using Shingon, causality fracture. He saw 3 futures. Future 1. Dodge left. May's sickle takes his arm. Future 2. Dodge right. Iam's scythe removes his head. Future 3. Stay still. Zhang's dagger pierces his heart. He chose the 4th option. You are using Oblivion's mark? Absolute lock. Northern's hand moved. The air itself seemed to freeze. Zhang appeared from a shadow mid-thrust and stopped. His body locked in place, dagger inches from Northern's chest. His eyes were wide with shock, mouth open in a scream that wouldn't emerge. Locked. May's sickles stopped mid-flight. All of them. Every crystallized blood weapon hung suspended in the air like grotesque ornaments. Locked. Iam's scythe halted mid-swing, the death energy dissipating like smoke. She tried to melt into shadow, couldn't. Her talent simply stopped working. Locked. Kai's swords froze, the cutting lines he'd created fading as if they'd never existed. He struggled to move, but his body refused to obey. Locked. Absolute lock seal any ability, power, or function completely. Lock targets cannot use the sealed aspect until the lock is removed. Northern walked forward. He passed Zhang's frozen form, his hand brushing the young man's shoulder. Your shadow domain is impressive. The territory control, the omnidirectional awareness, it's exactly what an assassin needs. He continued to May, observing the blood weapons suspended around her. and using your own blood as ammunition while marking the battlefield for weapon teleportation. Efficient, brutal, and effective. He stopped before Ayam, looking at her through the veil. Your requiem weakens the boundary between life and death. That's actually terrifying. Against anyone with less essence than me, they'd simply expire from accumulated minor wounds. He inspected her even more, checking all her abilities. There was only 2 talents that caught his fancy, and hers was one of them. Name: Kageyama Ayam. True name: the Night Bloom. Soul rank: transient, sage. Soul saturation: mid. Talent: eclipse of the dying moon. Talent class: S. Talent abilities: Moonless Night, Deathmark, Soul Reaper, Shadow Step, Requiem. Aoi? Can I see the details of the abilities? Shingon has analyzed every core of it, so this is possible. Here are the details. Moonless Night, Drifter. Create absolute darkness in an area. Even those with dark vision see nothing. Deathmark, Nomad. Mark a target. You always know where they are and can sense their vitality. Soul Reaper, Vagrant/Master. Your attacks drain life force. Wounds you inflict don't heal naturally. Shadow Step, Maverick/Savant. During darkness, teleport unlimited times between shadows. In moonlight, teleport less. Requiem, Transient/Sage. Sing a soundless song that weakens the boundary between life and death. Those near death slip away faster. The dying feel peace. Certainly interesting. Northern thought deeply for a second, but instead decided to check the abilities of the other talent that interested him. Finally, he stood before Kai. And you, the coordinator. You don't fight for yourself, you fight to create openings for your siblings. That takes incredible discipline. Name: Kageyama Kaizen. True name: the Cutter of Darkness. Soul rank: ephemeral, ascendant. Soul saturation: mid. Talent: Umbral Severance. Talent class: A. Talent abilities: Shadow Blade, Phantom Edge, Crow's Talons, Severance, Void Slash, Assassination Certainty. These abilities are looking quite delicious. Aoi. Here are the details. Shadow Blade, Drifter. Manifest weapons from shadows that cut through physical matter. Phantom Edge, Nomad. Your blade exists in 2 states, physical and shadow. Can phase through defenses. Crow's Talons, Vagrant/Master. Split your shadow blade into multiple cutting edges that attack independently. Severance, Maverick/Savant. Any cut you make severs, not just flesh but connections. Can cut someone's link to their talent temporarily. Void/Transient/Sage. A cut that exists in the space between shadows. Invisible, untraceable, impossible to block. Assassination Certainty. Ephemeral/Ascendant. Once you've marked a target, your next killing strike will land. Bending probability itself. Northern's mouth almost fell. Was this guy holding back throughout the battle, or was he being held back because he had to coordinate attacks with them? Either way, Northern quickly made his decision. He certainly didn't have 16,000 talent fragments to copy all 2. Can't be too sure about that. Let's check first. Profile. User: Rian Artemis Riem Guard. True name: unwritten. Soul rank: evanescent, paragon. Essence: 100%. Talent fragments: 11, 635/800000. Northern clicked bitterly. Dang, almost close. Copy Umbral Severance. You have lost 6,000 talent fragments. Northern stepped back, looking at all 4 of them. Your swordsmanship of the Crow is beautiful. The way you move together, anticipate each other, create compound attacks with no wasted motion. I can see why your clan is feared. His expression hardened. But I don't have time for this. You are using Phantom Strike, Phase Strike. Phase Strike, your attacks can phase through defenses, armor, shields, barriers, and strike the target directly. Ignores all physical protection. Northern's hand moved through the air. Nothing seemed to happen. Then Zhang's dagger shattered. The blade burst into fragments that clattered to the ground. Mei's sickles cracked, spiderweb fractures spreading across the metal before they broke apart. Iam's scythe split in half, the shaft severed so cleanly it looked like it had been cut by a concept rather than a blade. Kai's twin swords exploded into shrapnel. Northern released the lock. All four Kageyama collapsed to their knees, gasping. Their weapons were destroyed. Their talents were still there, but the shock of having them completely nullified, then having their weapons destroyed without even seeing the attack, left them reeling. Zhang tried to stand. His legs wouldn't support him. What are you? Northern looked down at him. For a moment, his azure eyes glowed coldly. Someone who destroyed an entire canyon of monsters that your clan couldn't kill for all their generations. He turned toward the far end of the chamber where light filtered through a doorway. Now, where are my parents? Iam's voice trembled from behind her veil. The depths. Father found Shin and took him to the depths. As for the elf lady, we couldn't find her. They were elven men that came after her. Father let them, but they were all dead. Slain by some monster. Northern paused. If I find so much as a scratch of a wound. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The temperature in the room had dropped. Shadows writhed at the edges of the chamber, not from the Kageyama's talents, but from something else entirely. From something that made even assassins who'd lived their entire lives in darkness feel afraid of it. Northern looked at them all. Take me to this depths. Northern could sense hesitation in them, but he also could sense their fear, especially since he had easily dismantled their coordinated attacks and showed them just how pointless fighting against him could be. Unless they wanted to be stupid, they wouldn't pull any stunts. I can't trust people not to be stupid. He turned particularly to Kai and tilted his head slightly. Kai exhaled and glanced at his brother Zhang before saying evenly, I'll take you there. Zhang said nothing. Instead, he gritted his teeth in silence. Northern exhaled. Well then? As they were about to turn, Zhang's voice rolled out with pain. Who are you? Northern looked at the young man for a moment. Zhang looked like he was in his mid-20s, though he had a very childlike appearance with his short and tousled hair. He also had a short stature that could easily make people underestimate his age. He certainly looked more mature than Kai despite their differences in height. Northern gave him a stunning smile. Your adopted cousin? He glanced around. The welcome party could really do better. But I can't complain. I guess this is better than my sister trying to drag me back to a home that was most likely almost killed. He shrugged. Things don't need to get complicated. We don't need to be each other's enemies. Certainly not in this farmland of a world. But if you insist on bad blood. His stunning smile stretched, gaining a malicious edge. Please, be my guest. He turned and was escorted away by Kai. They descended into a spiral of stairs that got dark and only got darker, such that Northern's ability to see through the eyes of the shadow only saw darkness. At first, Northern thought it was just that deep, but as soon as they began to descend, he was already analyzing the depths with his demon eyes. After a couple of minutes, Northern's lips curled, and for the first time since they started descending, his hoarse voice spoke. You wouldn't happen to be leading me into a trap, right? Kai took his time. Naturally, and you asked to be led into it. The dark depth is a pseudo-soul world. I'm sure someone of your strength would know what a soul world is. If you walked through the region of death, then certainly you'd understand what this place is even better. A small frown creased Northern's brows. It is a corrupted domain. I figured, although it doesn't come close to the Belials. Kai's voice filled the descending darkness. What makes this place terrible is that it's a soul world that has been cultivated for all 49 generations of patriarchs, starting from the first patriarch who became a luminary. He used the region of death as a learning instrument to materialize his soul world into reality. This ability is the major backbone of our clan's heritage. It is the reason we are what the world says we are. Each of us has the ability to also manifest a fragment of this domain regardless of the distance. Imagine a sage manifests a domain, Even though it's merely a fragment, it's a domain that has been cultivated by 49 paragons at the very least. Northern paid attention, nodding gently, impressed by the information. Meanwhile, Kai continued. It might not be as terrifying as the region of death, but I'll advise you not to look down on the growth and innovation of 49 humans. Northern smiled. You certainly do not need to advise me. I've seen too much to look down on anyone or anything. Northern gave Kai a scrutinizing look from behind. You look like the odd one out. Kai chuckled lightly. I am in every manner of the word, but I've had to dim the intensity of my darkness, so we can be a family again. I didn't want to become the monster my father created me to be. Northern was silent for a second. I see, Kai added. And I certainly must find her. Northern hesitated but then asked. By her, do you mean your half-sister? Raven Kageyama. Immediately, Kai stopped in his tracks. Northern could see his shoulders tremble slightly. Interesting. He seemed startled as he turned, his face slightly pale. How did you? Dark Continent. We met in the Dark Continent. Northern answered him evenly. He exhaled, looking down somberly. I heard some news about how she had been sacrificing herself so that many could get home. Northern looked at Kai blankly. You have it wrong. Kai looked at Northern, confused. It's what many people said. They also have it all wrong. He exhaled. She did it for herself. She wanted to trap herself in the Dark Continent so she wouldn't have to come home. Northern's gaze intensified on him. His blue eyes lit up the darkness a little. That was how much she hated this clan. Kai frowned, certainly displeased by what Northern had just spewed. But Northern did not stop there. Killing a 5-year-old child just because she was immortal? Really? Kai's gaze held a lot of resentment. It made the darkness heavier somewhat. There was a note of hesitation in his voice. My siblings, they were incredibly jealous and wary of her abilities, and that took the form in many malformed manners. Northern's gaze was blank, not dishing out any bit of emotion or pity. He exhaled and shrugged. Well, not my business really, but if you want to meet her, I can make that happen. Kai looked at him with hope radiating from his eyes. Really? Northern's finger pointed forward. Shin. Ah, right, yes. Please, let's be on our way. They continued to descend into the depths. The stairs flowed even longer downwards. Northern considered spreading all his awareness talent abilities, but decided against it. They most likely will give off a measure of his strength. He didn't want the patriarch of the Kageyama clan to get too alerted and not underestimate him. So he decided to just walk in blind. Not that it mattered. He may have 49 generations of cultivated domain. At the end of the day, he was only a paragon. Northern certainly was not looking down on him, but it was going to be a disgrace if after so much, he lost to a paragon for such a flimsy reason. He didn't beat the crap out of Chaos Prince, who had existed for over 10,000 years, just to come and lose to a cockroach of a paragon. And his concerns were certainly beyond all this. Northern's eyes narrowed as they went deeper and deeper into the depth. Finally, Kai stopped and looked back at him. A small crease was on his brows. He stared forward. Ahead of them was what felt like pure death. The place was like a wall of darkness but seemed liquid in nature, at the same time shifted to a solid state in and out of the second. This was the outer barrier of the pseudo-soul world. Third barrier. He had noticed the first and second barrier. The first existed the moment they stepped into the staircase. The second was when it blocked off the eyes of the shadow. Northern sighed and split in two. A small surprise ran across Kai's face. He noted that Northern hadn't even used this ability when fighting with them. And more so, Shin's ability. He muttered. Northern said nothing and simply walked in, while the other one looked at him and smiled. All right, let's go back up. Or do you want to join? He pointed back at the barrier. Kai stared at the dark barrier, a small frown on his face. He seemed confliced, deeply. What are you going to do? Northern held his gaze evenly. I'm going to take my father, at all cost, and if I find any wound on his body, I'll inflict it tenfold in your father's blood. His tone was sharp and cold, holding no wasted emotion, just facts coldly spoken. A bitter smile spread across Kai's face. Fair. Although I'm not certain you'll be successful with any of that. You just walked into your own death. What do you want to do from here? Search your entire clan. I don't believe that you don't know where my mother is. Northern turned and glanced back at him. I don't trust you, but I'll have to make do with you for now. Kai exhaled and followed Northern. At the same time, Northern entered into the domain of darkness, coming out into a terrifying night storm. The scenery completely changed the moment he stepped through. The sky was a bright night, with several moons scattered across the sky. The clouds were dark with azure edges, as though each one of them trapped a blue light within them. It was absolute darkness, and even though Northern tried to use Eyes of the Shadow to peek through the shadows, it was not working. It's a different kind of darkness? It had to be something like eclipsing dread that could create its own darkness. If not, there was no other explanation. There was no sight of the Patriarch, only a vast and seemingly dark plains and dark skies with several moons scattered abroad, casting lights that were immediately absorbed into the dark clouds, which in turn drenched the strange land of death in darkness. Northern sighed heavily. Okay, I have to admit, this is a little foreboding. He stood still, looking forward. Ahoy! We can use Talent Weave to create a mixture of talent abilities that will give us a multi-sensory web. A small smile curved his lips. Go on. Soul Thread's Gossamer domain can establish the base sensory field. Wind manipulation will extend our reach through air displacement. Omnithermic sense will detect heat signatures independent of light. Flow perception will track all movement and momentum. Combined through Talent Weave, they'll create a three-dimensional awareness map of this entire domain. Northern's eyes gleamed with cold calculation. How long? The weave will take 3 seconds to stabilize. I recommend naming it for easier activation in future encounters. Do it now. A pulse of energy rippled outward from Northern's core. He felt the distinct signatures of 4 different talents beginning to intertwine, their individual threads braiding together into something new. The sensation was strange, like 4 different senses trying to occupy the same space in his mind simultaneously, then suddenly clicking into harmony. Gossamer domain unfurled first, invisible soul threads spreading outward in a perfect sphere, each one a nerve ending connected directly to his consciousness. Wind manipulation layered over it next, sending currents of air flowing along the threads like blood through veins, extending his reach beyond the 100-meter limit. Omnithermic sense painted the darkness in thermal gradients. Cold blues where the strange darkness absorbed even heat, and sudden bright spots of warmth scattered throughout the domain. While Demon Eye's flow perception tied it all together, creating a living map of motion and stillness, momentum and stagnation. You are using Talent Weave, Omnisphere. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Northern's mind expanded. He could feel the domain now, not see it, but perceive it in a way that transcended sight. Every shift in air pressure, every trace of residual heat, every tremor of movement across his soul threads painted a picture more complete than vision ever could. The vast dark plains stretched for approximately 2 kilometers in every direction. The ground beneath his feet was strange, solid but somehow hollow, as if the entire landscape was a thin shell over an infinite void. And then he felt them. 7 heat signatures. One directly ahead, approximately 800 meters away. Massive, overwhelming. A sun of thermal energy that burned so intensely it warped the air currents around it. The other 6 were scattered throughout the domain, sentries, perhaps. Each one radiated power equivalent to a master rank, maybe higher. But there was something else. A cold spot. Not the absence of heat, but something that devoured it. A void in his thermal map, roughly 300 meters to his left and moving in slow, deliberate circles. And at the very edge of his awareness, barely detectable, a faint, struggling warmth. Weak, barely alive. Father. Northern's expression didn't change, but his clone behind him felt the shift in his essence. Ice-cold rage, perfectly controlled. Aoi mark all signatures. Priority. The cold void and the weak signature. Marked. The cold anomaly appears to be patrolling. The weak signature is stationary, approximately 1.2 kilometers northeast. It's fading. Northern gritted his teeth and exploded forward with a speed that made the domain shake. Northern flew through the domain like a missile of wind, spiraling and parting the very darkness itself with an explosive speed, one unlike the domain had ever witnessed before. Incoming. Already noted. Northern frowned as he turned his head slightly to the right. Just as the thing, whatever it was about to collide, he halted abruptly. The wind displaced because of his abrupt stop gained a sharp edge and exploded in the direction of the incoming projectile. However, just as it collided and was supposed to tear it to shreds, a ball of darkness protected it. It easily pierced through the wind blades without getting hurt, but its speed was reduced. As it passed through, Northern already shot a punch forward. His fist connected with the darkness, but instead of shattering under his might, it merely rippled. Northern noted it felt like striking the surface of water with so much force. The sphere of darkness pulsed and suddenly erupted. Tendrils of black shot out in every direction. Northern twisted midair, wind surging around him as he dodged left, but the tendrils curved impossibly, tracking his movement like living things. His body divided instantly. One Northern continued dodging, weaving through the air with wind-assisted agility. The other shot forward like a bullet, abandoning the fight entirely and racing toward his father's fading signature. The sphere didn't pursue the fleeing clone. Instead, it expanded, the darkness unfurling into a humanoid shape, tall, faceless, wreathed entirely in shifting black that seemed to drink in the moon's light. Northern's eyes narrowed as his omnisphere registered its heat signature. Nothing. Not cold. Not hot. It was simply nothing. It didn't have a temperature signature and certainly didn't exist. Anomaly detected. This entity has no thermal presence despite physical interaction. Contradiction with observed physics. I know, Aoi. Tell me what I don't know. The dark figure raised one hand, and the air around Northern suddenly thickened. Not with wind resistance, with pure darkness. It poured into the space like liquid filling a container, surrounding him in a sphere of black. You're using Windless. Windless created a zone of absolute stillness that should have expelled the darkness, but it didn't move. Instead, it solidified. The liquid darkness crystallized into jagged obsidian walls in an instant, trapping him in a cage. Northern's fist lit with flame, Ignis Dominus, and he punched the wall. The fire blazed brilliantly for a half-second, then dimmed, as if the darkness was suffocating it. The obsidian cracked but didn't shatter. Energy absorption detected. Flames are being drained at point of contact. Northern's jaw tightened. You're using binding weave. He switched tactics. Threads of soul energy spun from his fingertips and lashed out to ensnare the dark figure beyond the cage. The threads passed through it like it wasn't there at all. But the cage was solid. Real. He could feel it, touch it, and it was draining his flames. What? The dark figure tilted its head, and the cage collapsed inward, walls rushing toward Northern from all sides. He dissolved into wind and shot upward, bursting through the top of the cage before it could crush him. The moment he reformed, his omnisphere flared with warning. 3 more signatures approaching. Fast. Northern spun mid-air. 3 more shapes emerged from the darkness of the plains, each one humanoid, each one draped entirely in that same void-black essence. One raised both hands, and the ground beneath Northern's position inverted. Up became down. Gravity reversed in a localized pocket, yanking him toward the sky that was now ground. Northern adapted instantly, using the reversed gravity to accelerate his flight, but the second figure was already moving. It stepped through space. One moment it was 200 meters away. The next, it was beside him, hand thrusting forward. Northern blocked with his forearm, and felt his essence drain at the point of contact. It didn't feel like it was stolen. It was more like pouring water through a sieve. You're using lightning chains. He yanked his arm back, chains of lightning whipping out of them. The bolt leapt from his hand, arcing toward all 4 figures simultaneously. The lightning struck and refracted. The 3rd figure held up one hand, and the lightning bent around it like light through a prism, scattering into 7 different directions, none of which hit their targets. Instead, the redirected bolts curved back toward Northern himself. He created a wind barrier, dispersing the electricity harmlessly, but the 1st figure was already moving again. This time, the darkness around Northern didn't attack him. It attacked his senses. His omnisphere suddenly lit up with dozens of false heat signatures, phantom winds, fake movements. His own sensory web was being polluted with false information, drowning the real in an ocean of lies. Interference detected across all weave components. Filtering. Northern gritted his teeth and split again. 2 more clones burst from his body, each one immediately shooting off in different directions. Toward his father, away from the fight, creating distance and confusion. The 4 dark figures didn't pursue the clones. They multiplied. Each one split, mirroring Northern's own technique. For became 8. 8 became 16. And every single one radiated that same impossible nothingness. 1.1 kilometers away, Northern was racing toward his father's signature, but suddenly he jerked to a halt. A wall of darkness erupted from the ground ahead, stretching up into the false sky like a tidal wave frozen mid-crash. He shifted direction, trying to go around, but the wall curved with him, always staying ahead, always blocking. The domain is actively preventing approach to the target location. Northern snarled and unleashed Sola Nova, pouring everything into a supernova-scale explosion aimed directly at the wall. The flames detonated with apocalyptic force. The wall absorbed it completely. There was no scorched mark on it, no crack. It simply ate an explosion the level of a supernova. Back at the main battle, Northern was now fighting 32 dark figures. Each one had a different ability. One made his attacks pass through it, but its attacks were solid. Another reversed the vectors of his strikes, turning his own force against him. A third created copies of his techniques in darkness, countering fire with black flames, wind with void currents. A fourth erased sections of space, forcing Northern to dodge holes in reality itself. And no matter what he did, flames, lightning, wind, soul threads, absolute zero ice. Every attack either passed through them harmlessly or was absorbed, reflected, or nullified. But their attacks always landed. Northern split again, and again. 5 clones now, each engaging different groups of dark figures, trying to create an opening, trying to reach his father. Every clone was stopped. Every clone was surrounded. And his father's heat signature was growing fainter. You will need to stop. What? Stop. The urgency in her mental voice made him freeze for a fraction of a second. And in that moment, one of the dark figure's attacks passed through his guard and struck his chest. His essence plummeted. You cannot win this fight. I can. I have completed analysis of the domain. You cannot interact with them, but they can interact with you. These entities share the same properties as the domain itself. They are projections, illusions given weight by the soul world's authority. You are fighting the domain, not people. Northern's eyes widened slightly. The Patriarch is not fighting you. He is using his soul world to stall you. The domain recognizes you as an intruder and is responding accordingly. These figures are not real, they are defense mechanisms. You cannot damage what does not exist, but they can damage you because the domain has authority over everything within it. Northern dodged another strike, his mind racing. Then how do I? You do not fight the illusions. You fight the domain itself. Or you find a way to make yourself part of it. So the domain no longer sees you as an intruder. Northern's jaw clenched as another wave of dark figures began materializing from the ground. His father's signature pulsed weakly at the edge of his omnisphere. He was running out of time. Northern's clones converged, merging back into one as the dark figures swarmed. His jaw clenched, mind racing through options, discarding them as fast as they formed. Make myself part of the domain? That's practically impossible. The dark figures closed in from all sides. 32. 40. more materializing from the ground with every passing second. His father's heat signature pulsed again, weaker than before. Northern's eyes narrowed. Aoi, the endless maw. You want to manifest Motharaxis's domain? Here? Now? Can I? Theoretically, yes. You copied the form and its essence manifestation. But it'll cost a terrible amount of essence. I know. You'll have minutes at most. The domain is apex Belial rank authority clashing with a celestial rank soul world. The strain will be... No. Another dark figure lunged. Northern sidestepped, its clawed hand passing through his shoulder. Cold, draining, wrong. His essence reserves dropped another percentage. He was running out of time. If I manifest the endless maw inside this domain, what happens? Localized reality conflict. Two competing authorities. His illusions will be forced to either become real or break down entirely within your bubble. The domain's rules will fracture in the contested space. You'll create a zone where you can interact with everything, but only within your manifestation radius. Radius. At your current soul rank? Estimated 80 to 100 meters. Maybe less. You're a paragon trying to wield a Belial's power. Northern's lips curved into something too sharp to be called a smile. Good enough. Do it. He planted his feet. The dark figures swarmed closer, sensing something shifting in their prey. Northern closed his eyes. Transform. Motharaxis. Form 1. The Devourer. For exactly 5 seconds, Northern's body seized. Essence poured outward in a torrent, reshaping, restructuring, breaking him down to rebuild him as something else. The dark figures struck. Their attacks landed. Claws raking across his transforming body, essence draining, pain exploding through his nervous system. And then the transformation was completed. Northern's eyes snapped open. They were no longer human. Crimson, burning, slitted like a predator's but wrong, endless, as if staring into them meant falling into an abyss with teeth. His body had grown, massively, 12 feet tall. His frame now a twisted amalgamation of draconic and insectoid features. His skin was deep crimson plating, ridged with black chitin that pulsed with inner heat. His hands had become clawed monstrosities, each finger tipped with obsidian talons. His mouth stretched too wide, far too wide, lined with rows of serrated teeth that glinted in the strange moonlight. His breath came out as steam, superheated and toxic. Horns curved back from his skull, jagged and asymmetrical. His spine jutted with blade-like protrusions. His legs bent wrong, digitigrade, ending in claws that sank into the ground as if the earth itself couldn't hold his weight. The air around him shimmered with heat distortion. The dark figures hesitated. For the first time since entering this domain, they stopped. Northern's voice came out distorted, layered, as if multiple throats spoke in unison. Deep, guttural, alien. Now. He slammed both clawed hands into the ground. And the world screamed. From the point of impact, reality cracked. Not metaphorically. The air itself fractured like glass, jagged lines of crimson light spiderwebbing outward in every direction. The dark plains beneath Northern's feet began to warp, stone softening, color bleeding away, replaced by something older, hungrier. The pseudo-soul world of the patriarch resisted. Azure light flared from the clouds above, the strange moons pulsing brighter as the domain fought back, trying to suppress the intrusion, trying to eject the foreign authority. But Northern poured everything into it. Essence flooded outward in a wave. His reserves plummeted 70%, 60%, 50%, draining faster than blood from a severed artery. And the endless maw manifested, started small. A sphere of warped reality centered on Northern, maybe 20 meters in radius. But it spread. 50 meters. 70. 90. The ground within the bubble changed. The dark plains cracked and split, revealing obsidian cliffs that rose from beneath. Gravity doubled within the sphere, pressing down like an invisible hand. The temperature spiked. 30 degrees. 40. 50. Air shimmering with heat haze. The sky within the bubble darkened further, but it was a different darkness now, hungrier and alive. And the rules changed. The dark figures caught within the endless maw's radius suddenly solidified. One of them, the closest, had been mid-lunge when the domain manifested. His form flickered, wavered, then became tangible. The nothing it was became something within the endless maw. Northern's clawed hand shot out and grabbed it by the throat. Northern's jaws split wider than any human mouth should, and he bit. The creature's head came off in a spray of black ichor and it collapsed, body convulsing, then dissolving into ash. Partial domain manifestation successful. Radius, 95 meters. Essence reserves, 47%. Estimated duration, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. Northern didn't respond. He was already moving. The other dark figures within his domain bubble scrambled backward, but they were slow now, weighed down by the doubled gravity, slowed by the oppressive heat, and most importantly, vulnerable. Northern became a blur. His clawed hand swept through one figure, tearing it in half. Another tried to counter with that space-erasing ability, but within the endless maw's authority, Northern's will overrode it. The space didn't erase. The attack failed. He crushed its skull underfoot. A third launched those darkness projectiles. Northern didn't dodge. The projectiles struck his armored hide and shattered, unable to drain essence from something that was the domain. Aoi summon echoes. Use Puppeteer's malice to pull a massive aggro and make them all converge towards this domain. Make it so massive that even a paragon can't ignore it. Understood. Using echo summoning. 1,000 echoes are flaring to reality around you. Using Puppeteer's malice. Different slag WIRMS flared to life, rushing forward. There were Frost WIRMS and Storm WIRMS, monsters with body like charcoal and looked like castrated dogs. Easily 5 feet tall also appeared shooting forward. They were some that looked like insect monsters he saw on the first layer. And there were even more. Some were abominations with charred skin and grotesque skeleton wing that helped them fly. Some were fiendish, deteriorating skinned quadruped creatures, all of them lumbering forward in the endless maw and burying their merciless jaw on the creatures. More of these strange creatures lumbered from all directions, all converging towards Northern. Because of the intense aggro, Northern was sure his other self could have a safe and easy flight to save his father. But his time was also limited. He had to destroy all this monster and also, most especially in fact, the Paragon in 4 minutes. And there were no signs of the damn Paragon yet. Northern tore through the darkness, essence burning like a comet as he pushed beyond sustainable speeds. The Omnisphere guided him through the shifting terrain, avoiding the walls that tried to manifest, the pits that opened beneath phantom feet. Behind it, in the distance, reality itself was screaming. The main body's domain clash sent shockwaves through the Patriarch's soul world, distortions rippling outward, azure light flickering as the Authority struggled to maintain cohesion in 2 places at once. Northern felt it. The pressure was lessening because the domain was trying to dominate the other authority that had entered it. This made the resistance in other areas way weaker. He flew through the air at great speed. The heat signature grew clearer, stronger now that nothing was suppressing the Omnisphere's perception. He crested a ridge of obsidian stone and stopped. Below, in a shallow crater carved into the dark plains, a figure hung suspended in midair. Northern's eyes widened. Father! Shin hung 3 feet off the ground, arms spread wide, wrists and ankles bound by chains of crystallized azure light. The chains weren't attached to anything physical. They simply existed, anchored to the domain itself. His head hung forward, black hair, now streaked with more gray than Northern remembered, falling across his face. His clothes were torn, stained with dried blood. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. But he was alive. Northern landed softly at the crater's edge, every sense on high alert. He descended into the crater slowly, eyes scanning for traps, for hidden threats, for anything that screamed ambush. Nothing. Just Shin, the chains, and the oppressive silence of the pseudo-soul world. Northern reached the bottom and approached cautiously. Father! Shin didn't move. Father! Still nothing. Northern reached out, hand trembling slightly, and the moment his fingers touched Shin's shoulder, his father's eyes snapped open. They were bloodshot, exhausted, but aware. North! The voice was hoarse, cracked, like he hadn't spoken in days. I'm here. Northern's hand tightened on his shoulder. I'm getting you out. Shin's eyes focused slowly, confusion giving way to recognition, then to horror. No! The word came out as a rasp. No, you need to leave. Now. I'm not leaving without you. Northern! Shin coughed, body convulsing. When he spoke again, blood flecked his lips. It's a trap. This whole thing. He wanted you to come. I know. Northern's voice was cold, certain. I don't care. His hands moved to the chains, gripping the crystallized light. The moment it touched them, pain screamed through his essence, like grabbing a live wire made of pure soul energy. Northern gritted its teeth and pulled. The chains didn't budge. They're bound to the domain, Shin managed. Can't break them. Not unless I break the domain itself. Northern's eyes narrowed. Working on it. In the distance, that reality scream intensified. The ground trembled. Azure light flickered across the false sky. Shin's eyes widened slightly. What did you? Northern, what did you do? What I had to. Northern tried again, this time wrapping wind around the chains, using windlass to create zones of absolute stillness, trying to freeze the energy in place and using ice manipulation to solidify it so it could be shattered. The chains pulsed brighter, drinking both the wind and ice, absorbing them like fuel. Damn it! Northern! Shin's voice was firmer now despite his condition. Listen to me. You need to. He stopped. His entire body went rigid. Northern felt it too. A change in the air that caused his brows to furrow. Behind him, at the crater's edge, a voice spoke. Calm, measured, almost gentle. How touching! Northern slowly turned. A figure stood silhouetted against the flickering azure sky. Tall, black hair, red eyes that burned like distant stars. The Patriarch. He descended into the crater with slow, deliberate steps, hands clasped behind his back, expression unreadable. You've done well to reach this far, young Northern. Better than I expected, truth be told. His gaze flicked to the distant distortion where the main body fought, manifesting a soul world at evanescent rank. Remarkable. Your talent is exceptional. Northern said nothing. He just stood there, looking at the Patriarch with a blank expression, trying to suppress his anger and act with a cool head. The Patriarch stopped 10 meters away, but ultimately futile. He gestured lazily toward Shin. These chains are woven from the domain's foundation. To break them, you would need to collapse the entire soul world, and we both know you lack the strength for that. Try me. A faint smile touched the Patriarch's lips. I already am. He raised one hand. The azure chains binding Shin tightened, digging into his wrists and ankles. Shin gasped in pain, body arching involuntarily. Stop! Northern surged forward. The Patriarch's smile widened and then froze, because Northern didn't slam into an invisible wall. He didn't slow or stop. Instead, he easily crossed 10 meters in a fraction of a heartbeat. Faster than thought, faster than reaction, and his fist drove straight into the Patriarch's face. The impact was cataclysmic. The Patriarch's head snapped back with a wet crack. His entire body lifted off the ground, hurled backward like a ragdoll. He crashed into the crater wall 30 meters away, obsidian stone exploding on impact, spiderweb cracks radiating outward. Northern was already moving. He crossed the distance before the Patriarch could even hit the ground. His hand shot forward, grabbed the older man by the throat, and slammed him through the wall entirely. Stone shattered. Dust exploded outward. Northern didn't let go. He dragged the Patriarch through the rubble, spun, and hurled him across the crater. The Patriarch's body tumbled end over end, carving a trench through the dark earth before slamming into the opposite wall. This time, the Patriarch caught himself. His feet touched stone, and he pushed, launching himself back toward Northern with speed that blurred the air. His fist came in fast and precise, aimed at Northern's temple. Northern's head tilted fractionally. The punch missed by millimeters. Northern's counter didn't. His hand caught the Patriarch's wrist mid-strike, squeezed and bone crunched. The Patriarch's eyes widened in shock and pain. Northern's other fist drove into his ribs. The sound was like a tree trunk snapping. Ribs shattered 3, 4, maybe 5, caving inward under the force of Northern's monstrous strength. The Patriarch gasped. Blood sprayed from his lips. Northern didn't stop. He released the wrist, grabbed the Patriarch's shoulder, yanked him forward into a rising knee strike that connected with his sternum. Another crack. The Patriarch's body folded around the impact, lifting off the ground again. And Northern performed an impressive 540 kick in an inverted position, slamming his leg into the Patriarch that was rising up. Blood erupted from his mouth. His body launched, spinning through the air, crashing into the ground hard enough to crater it. For a moment he didn't move. Then, impossibly, he pushed himself up. Blood dripped from his mouth. His breathing was ragged, labored. His left arm hung useless, wrist shattered, fingers twitching spasmodically. His ribs were caved in on one side, each breath a visible agony. But his eyes burned with something cold, calculating. "I see," he wheezed. "It seems I have made an incredible mistake." Northern said nothing, looking at the Patriarch with a cold, dark, but even stare. Then he stepped forward with unhurried, deliberate steps, like when a serial killer was slowly walking his way towards a scrambling target. The Patriarch straightened, slowly and painfully. "Who are you? I've read all about you from my brother's memory. Quite an anomaly you are. But I think I know what you are." He fixed Northern a vicious grin, and then his essence flared. "Long, long ago, the first Patriarch of..." Northern clicked his tongue. "I'm not going to have a story moment with you." He moved sharply, before the man could even follow, and buried a blow into his chest. The Patriarch's flaring essence seized for the moment. His entire body paused and broke apart to process the intensity of that simple blow. A blast of wind exploded from his back, and he folded towards Northern before exploding away like a fired missile. "You're using wind embrace." Northern took flight, vanishing into the wind at a terrible rate. He twirled and slammed a kick down the flying body of the Patriarch, causing him to crash into the ground. A massive shockwave of stones and debris exploded outwards, and a deep crater instantly formed in the ground. The Patriarch shrieked where he was. Quickly he spun and shot up. The darkness of the domain accompanied him, leaking out of every corner, from the dark clouds to the ground, and the swirled around him like a second body before extending to form 2 extra hands and for swords. Northern looked at him with interest, tilting his head. For a moment, Northern considered just finishing him off. But there was something that he couldn't resist. It was the same thing that had always plagued him from the beginning. Surely he was stronger than the Patriarch, but the man was a paragon, who could be considered the peak of the secretive combat style of the Kageyama clan. This was his opportunity to improve his combat mastery and style. It was something he enjoyed and couldn't resist when the time came. "You're using Shadow Blade." The Patriarch's eyes widened for a moment. Then they turned sharp. "I see." Shin's suspicions were rather true. "You're capable of copying abilities. That must belong to Kai." Northern looked at the slightly long straight sword that formed out of darkness. He consciously reduced the weight to make it lighter. Then he looked at his left hand. Another shadow swirled above his hand. "You're using Supreme Shadow. You're using Shadow Blade." This other sword was different. It was crafted from Northern's own semi-autonomous shadow that had its own senses. Hence, through it Northern could also sense movements through air displacement and wind patterns. Not that it mattered much, but that just simply meant that the sword will work its best to defend and create options for opening. "I think I just got an idea for the first weapon I want to forge." Northern created a clone that instantly ran towards Shin and began to create a cocoon of wood around both of them. The Patriarch's eyes tracked left, toward the clone and Shin. for a fraction of a second. That was all Northern needed. He materialized behind the Patriarch, both shadow blades already in motion. The right sword came high, the left swept low. A scissoring attack designed to split focus, force a choice. The Patriarch spun. His 4 shadow form swords moved independently, 2 blocked high, 2 blocked low. The clash rang out like struck bells. But Northern was already moving. His right blade disengaged, reversed grip, came back around in a circular slash aimed at the neck. His left sword pushed forward, driving toward the ribs. The Patriarch's 3rd and 4th shadow hands intercepted barely. The force drove him backward 3 steps. Northern didn't pursue. He stood there observing, analyzing with a soft azure glow in his eyes. The way the shadow hands moved, the positioning, the weight distribution, the timing between blocks and counters. Dual wielding but with 4 weapons. Each hand operates semi-independently while maintaining overall coordination. The Patriarch straightened with a slightly frustrated line on his face. Then he attacked again. This time faster, more aggressive. His blades became a blur, slashing, stabbing, feinting. Each strike came from a different angle, different timing, testing the Patriarch's defensive matrix. The Patriarch's 4 swords danced. He parried, deflected, redirected. His footwork was immaculate. Sliding backward, pivoting, creating distance when pressed too hard. Northern's omnisphere tracked every micro-movement, every weight shift, every breath, and he began to adapt. His next combination mirrored one of the Patriarch's defensive patterns, but inverted. Used offensively, the right blade feinted high while the left came in with a thrust that slipped through the Patriarch's guard by millimeters. The Patriarch twisted, avoided it by a hair's breadth. But his expression shifted. Surprise, then concern. Don't tell me. Abilities are not the only thing you can copy. Of course, unaware that Northern was not making use of any ability to copy his combat style and even invert it. This was all the young boy's experience and self-sufficient capacity. Northern said nothing. Instead, he pressed forward. 20 exchanges. 30. Each one faster than the last. The Patriarch's expression darkened. His 4 shadow swords dissolved, then reformed as 2 actual blades in his hands. Real steel. Ancient weapons that hummed with accumulated essence. He dropped into a stance Northern hadn't seen yet. Weight distributed evenly. Both swords held at odd angles, one high and inverted, one low and forward. Crow's descent stance. The Patriarch moved. Not in a straight line. He came at Northern like a bird diving, irregular spiral trajectory, switching directions mid-motion. His blades cut the air in crossing patterns that created a web of death. Northern's eyes tracked every angle. You're using flow perception. The momentum became visible lines of force, vectors of movement, the precise path each blade would take. He saw the attack before it fully formed. Northern's right sword rose, caught the descending blade. His left sword swept horizontal, intercepted the low strike. But the Patriarch twisted mid-clash, his body spinning like a corkscrew. Both his blades disengaged and came back around from new angles. Unpredictable, flowing. Feather step. He was not fighting like a human swordsman. He was fighting like wind through feathers. Every strike connecting and flowing to birth even more threatening and complicated strikes. Northern gave ground. 1 step. 2. Analyzing the rhythm, the way each strike fed into the next, the seamless transitions between high and low, left and right. The Patriarch pressed harder. His strikes came faster. Each one blended into the next without pause. A continuous assault like water pouring downhill. Northern blocked, parried, deflected, and copied. His footwork shifted, started matching the Patriarch's irregular rhythm. His blade angles adjusted, mimicking the inverted grip, the crossing patterns, the spiral approaches. The Patriarch's eyes widened. Impossible. That took me decades to. Northern's counterattack came mid-sentence. He used the Patriarch's own technique, feather step, but sharper, cleaner, without the wasted micro-movements that came from years of human habit. The Patriarch barely blocked. Barely. His breathing quickened. Northern tilted his head, watching. Continue. I want to see more. The patriarch's face twisted. Rage. Humiliation. Fear. All three at once, actually. An interesting combination. Darkness exploded from his body. The domain responded. Shadows crawled across the ground like living things, reaching for Northern's feet with grasping tendrils. The air thickened, became heavy, oppressive, pressing down on his shoulders like invisible weights. The patriarch's swords began to drip with black energy. It bore a gentle resemblance to void essence, but it wasn't. This one seemed corrupted and twisted, more engineered than naturally born. Like someone had tried to forge darkness itself and ended up with something wrong. He came again, this time faster, his sword swinging with a heavy ambience of death itself. Murder formation. His body blurred. Afterimages appeared, 10, 20, 50 copies, all attacking simultaneously from different angles. Each one looked real. Each one carried killing intent that made the air itself recoil. Northern's omnisphere saw through it instantly. One is real. The rest are shadow echoes layered with intent. Clever, but not clever enough. You're using Shingon, causality fracture. 3 possible futures branched before him. Future 1. Block the real attack, 6 afterimages converge and pin him. Future 2. Dodge left. Real attack adjusts mid-swing, takes his arm. Future 3. Attack the afterimages, real attack goes for his throat. None of those are acceptable. Northern chose the 4th option. You're using one's true self, true clone. 5 perfect copies of Northern materialized instantly, each one holding shadow blades, each one moving with identical precision, each one real in every way that mattered. The patriarch's murder formation crashed into Northern's clones like waves hitting rocks. Steel met shadow. Death energy met living essence. Afterimages met actual duplicates, and the world dissolved into a chaos of clashing blades and dissolving forms. The patriarch's real body emerged from the chaos, both swords aimed at what he thought was the real Northern. His eyes widened as his blade cut through the clone, and it instantly vanished. The real Northern stood behind him, both blades already moving. The patriarch's shadow hands reformed in a desperate surge, catching Northern's strikes an inch from his spine. But Northern's right blade, the one formed from supreme shadow, moved on its own. It sensed the opening before Northern consciously registered it, twisted like a living thing, and slashed toward an exposed flank. The patriarch threw himself sideways. Not fast enough. The blade cut through his dark robes and drew blood. A thin red line appeared on pale skin, and the scent of copper filled the air. The patriarch landed in a crouch, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. His breathing was ragged now. Sweat beaded on his pale skin despite the domain's cold. "What are you?" His voice cracked slightly. Northern dismissed his clones with a thought. They dissolved into shadow and returned to him, bringing their experiences with them. He winced. That technique is useful, but the sensory feedback is always annoying. Really? I'm getting tired of people asking me the same question. He rolled his shoulders, adjusting his stance. Get up. Show me more. The patriarch's hand trembled, but he straightened, fixing Northern with a dark and now wary glare. Good. Fear was more useful than arrogance. Northern adjusted his grip on both swords. The right one he now held in the same inverted style the patriarch favored. The left he gripped normally, but his stance was a perfect mirror of Featherstep, refined and optimized. Show me what 49 generations of masters created, Northern said, a refined smile curving his lips. The patriarch's face went pale, then red with fury. You dare! He stopped mid-word, closed his eyes, then took a breath. When they opened again, his red eyes were different, layered, as if 49 pairs of eyes were looking out from behind his own. Ancient and cold and absolutely focused. Danger observed. Northern narrowed his eyes. That guy mentioned that this domain has been refined for 49 generations. Aoi, what are the chances that their spectral forms, at least memories of their abilities, still live on and can be perpetrated through the domain? Correct. I suggest caution. You're about to enter battle with not one, but 37 paragons, 3 ascendants, 6 sages, and 4 luminaries. What? Oh, well, this just became significantly more complicated. The Patriarch's posture changed. His swords rose into a stance Northern hadn't seen yet. Ancient, predatory, absolute. The kind of stance that spoke of countless battlefields and a body count stretching into legend. Parliament's judgment. The Patriarch's voice layered into several overlapping voices, each one distinct yet harmonious. This is the accumulated killing intent of every Patriarch who came before. You wanted to see our art. The Patriarch moved. Not like before. Not like a man wielding swords. Like death itself given form and purpose. 49 phantom strikes came simultaneously. Each one a perfect killing technique passed down through generations. Each one aimed at a different vital point. Each one carrying the weight of mastery that couldn't be learned, only inherited through blood and bone. Northern's eyes widened slightly. Then a twisted, wrong, enjoying grin spread across his face. Interesting. This was what he'd come for. This was worth the trouble. You're using Shingon? All layers. Time seemed to slow. Not actually, just Northern's perception accelerating to process the incoming data. The world became a tapestry of moving lines and converging points. He saw every strike, every trajectory, every point of no return where blade would meet flesh. And he saw the spaces between them, the microsecond gaps where phantom blade became phantom blade, the rhythm underlying the chaos. It's a sequence, a specific order disguised as simultaneity. They're trying to overwhelm through complexity, but there's always a pattern. There has to be. The human mind can't operate without one. Northern's blades moved. Not to block all 49 strikes, impossible even for him, to disrupt the sequence. His left sword intercepted strike number 7. The one that was the linchpin. The strike that, if stopped, would cause strikes 8 through 15 to arrive out of sync. His right sword, guided by Supreme Shadow's autonomous sense, caught strike number 23. The recovery point where the sequence would reset if disrupted early. Steel rang against steel. The sound echoed strangely in the domain. The Parliament's judgment shattered. Phantom blades arrived out of order, collided with each other, dissolved into confusion like a formation breaking under pressure. The Patriarch's real strikes, hidden within the phantoms, were suddenly exposed, naked and vulnerable. Northern saw them, both of them. He twisted. One blade passed within an inch of his throat, close enough that he felt the cold kiss of its edge. He shifted his weight. The other blade missed his heart by a hair's breadth. And in that moment, when the Patriarch was fully committed, when all 49 ghosts had failed, Northern struck. You're using Phantom Strike, Phase Strike. His blades phased through the Patriarch's guard, through the shadow hands that materialized desperately to block, through the death energy trying to corrode the steel. They struck flesh. The strike was not deep. Northern didn't need it to be. Depth wasn't the point. Precision was. One blade cut the tendon in the Patriarch's left wrist. The other sliced through muscle in his right shoulder, severing the connections that allowed proper sword control. Both swords fell from nerveless fingers. They clattered against stone, the sound oddly final. The Patriarch staggered back. His shadow hands caught his real hands, held them up. But the damage was done. Those hands wouldn't grip a sword properly for weeks, if ever. He stared at Northern. This thing that had just dismantled 49 generations of accumulated mastery in a single exchange. His voice trembled. No, it can't be. Dismantling it like that. Copying can't do it. His brows drew together in disbelief as he seemed to connect the dots. Are you understanding? He swallowed hard. Why, you see the technique once and you understand it better than the people who spent lifetimes perfecting it. Northern said nothing, but his eyes confirmed it. After all, what was there to say? The truth was self-evident. The Patriarch was silent for a few seconds, his gaze growing distant. He suddenly looked down, then returned his gaze to Northern and laughed. The laugh sounded broken, hysterical, like something fundamental had cracked inside him. I trained my entire life, inherited the memories of 49 masters, perfected the heritage of killing until I could execute any technique in my sleep. His voice rose and fell in uneven waves. I became the domain. I was the accumulated wisdom of centuries. He looked at his useless hands. And you learned it all in 5 minutes. Northern shrugged. Practically, I wouldn't say all. But with the techniques you used, there's an easy thread that connects them all that my eyes can peer into. This makes it easier to not only read them but also analyze their form, separating their weaknesses from their strengths. He paused, then added with clinical detachment. Be it as it may, your heritage is actually full of flaws. Fundamental ones, at that. The foundation is solid, but the successive generations added complications without understanding the underlying principles. Each one trying to leave their mark, not realizing they were diluting the original intent. Silence. The domain trembled. Shadows writhed across the walls like wounded serpents. You dare to ridicule me and my ancestors. How dare you? Who fathered you and gave you such guts? Northern released a wry smile. The Emperor of Riemgard. You should take it up with him. You insolent wretch. The Patriarch's essence flared wildly once again, unstable and desperate. The shadows around him twisted wrongly, becoming jagged and sharp. If technique won't work, his body began to shift. Bones cracked with wet, organic sounds. Then I'll stop being human. It has always limited me anyway. Feathers burst from his skin. Black, glossy, each one edged with red like dried blood. They sprouted in clusters, tearing through flesh in a grotesque transformation. His bones cracked, reformed. Arms became wings, massive, sweeping things that seemed to drink in light. Legs became talons, each one as long as a sword and wickedly curved. His face elongated into a beak designed for tearing flesh, sharp enough to pierce steel. The obsidian crow emerged, 50 feet of wingspan, eyes like burning coals set in a skull too large to be natural, claws that could rend stone like parchment, a shriek that made the domain itself shudder, the very walls seeming to recoil from the sound. Well, that's unfortunate. The crow's eyes locked onto Northern, burning with rage and wounded pride and the fury of something that had just watched its entire world crumble. And it attacked with all the desperation of a creature that had nothing left to lose. The obsidian crow shrieked, a sound that tore through the air like rending metal, and launched itself forward. 50 feet of wingspan, talons extended, each one designed to pierce and rend. The beak opened wide, revealing a throat that burned with accumulated death energy. Centuries of it, probably. Maybe more. Fast. Incredibly fast. The kind of speed that came from a paragon channeling everything into pure, desperate offense. Northern didn't move. He stood there, shadow blades still in hand, watching the massive predator descend on him like a falling meteor. The wind from those wings alone could probably snap bones. The talons could definitely punch through steel. Interesting choice. Abandoning technique for raw power. The thought drifted through his mind with clinical detachment. Unfortunate choice, more accurately. After all, power without precision was just flailing. And flailing never worked against someone who knew what they were doing. The talons reached him. You're using wind embrace. Northern's body dissolved into wind. The Patriarch's talons closed on nothing, just air and shadows that scattered like startled birds. The momentum carried him forward, massive body crashing into the stone ground with enough force to crack it. Debris exploded outward in a wave that peppered the chamber walls. Dust billowed. The impact echoed. Northern stopped 20 feet to the left, standing casually on empty air as if it were solid ground. Did you abandon swords just to swing claws at me like an animal? His voice carried across the darkness, almost conversational, genuinely curious, even disappointing. The crow's head snapped toward him. Those burning coal eyes narrowed into slits of concentrated fury. It spread its wings, both intact despite the earlier punishment, and launched again. But this time it didn't come straight. It spiraled, using the domain's darkness to mask its approach, appearing and disappearing between shadows like some kind of predatory ghost. Northern's head tilted slightly. Oh, strategy now. How refreshing. You're using Supreme Shadow. You're using Eyes of the Shadow. Since he couldn't interact with the properties of the domain itself, he released his own semi-autonomous shadow and caused it to explode outward. The shadow became his eye, spreading like spilled ink across the chamber floor. Its pocket of darkness revealed the crow's position instantly, a bright beacon against the Patriarch's own failed concealment. The Patriarch wasn't hiding. He was broadcasting his location to someone who could see through darkness better than the Patriarch could create it. 3 positions. Left flank, right flank, directly above. Northern tracked each potential angle with the kind of focus most people reserved for chess problems. He'll strike from. The crow materialized above him, diving with both talons extended and wings folded for maximum speed. Killing blow. There. Northern raised his right hand. Palm up. Relaxed. You're using Sun's legacy, Pyreheart Ascendant. Pyreheart Ascendant. Your heart burns with eternal flame, immune to all heat and fire. Your blood is liquid fire. Your body temperature can melt steel. Radiate heat that turns your surroundings into a furnace. Heat exploded from his palm like a miniature sun being born. The temperature in the chamber spiked instantly, from cold to sweltering in a single heartbeat. The air itself seemed to scream. Stone began to glow at the edges. The darkness retreated from the light like something living. The obsidian crow shrieked. Not from pain. From shock. Its feathers, made of the shadow of death, woven from 49 generations of killing intent, began to burn with heat so intense it attacked the very concept of darkness itself. The flames ate at the absence of light, turning that void into ash. The Patriarch pulled up desperately, wings beating frantically to gain altitude. Smoking feathers drifted down like burning leaves in autumn. They dissolved before hitting the ground. You wanted to fly? Northern's voice was cold now. Clinical. The voice of someone conducting an experiment. Let me show you what that looks like when someone's actually good at it. You're using whispering gale, wind manipulation. The air in the chamber moved. Northern commanded it with absolute authority and zero negotiation, like a king commanding his subjects. The wind obeyed instantly, absolutely, as if it had been waiting for permission to act. Hurricane-force gusts slammed into the Patriarch from 6 directions simultaneously. They caught his wings mid-beat, twisted them at angles wings weren't meant to bend, folded them against his body like closing a book. The massive crow tumbled through the air, completely out of control, spinning like a leaf in a storm. He crashed into a distant valley in the domain. Stone shattered and dust filled the air in a choking cloud. The impact left a crater the size of a wagon. Northern floated there, standing on nothing, completely unbothered by the chaos he'd created. His hair didn't even move in the wind. That had to hurt. Get up. He kept his tone conversational. You're a paragon, aren't you? Act like one. The Patriarch emerged from the rubble slowly. Blood dripped from his beak. Actual blood, not shadow or death energy. Several feathers were missing, leaving bare patches on his wings that showed pale skin underneath. His eyes burned brighter, angrier. The domain responded to his fury like an extension of his body. Darkness surged from every corner. Not just visual darkness, but conceptual darkness. The kind that ate light, ate warmth, ate hope, ate the memory of safety. It wrapped around Northern like chains forged from despair itself, trying to drag him down, smother him, erase him from existence. Northern sighed. Oh, you're using the domain now. He examined the chains with mild interest. I was wondering when you'd try that again. You're using Oblivion's mark? Nullify. Nullify. Cancel out any ongoing effect, spell, or ability within your vicinity. Acts as a delete button for supernatural phenomena. Passive aura that weakens magic around you. His passive aura expanded. Not aggressively, not dramatically, Just existing, being. The way gravity existed. The way reality existed. Let's see if this works. Northern had been wondering if Nullify would function here, since he couldn't interact with the domain's properties directly. But Nullify was a talent that specialized in effects, spells, abilities. That, in existence, the domain created had to be an effect, conceptual or not. Effects could be negated. The domain's darkness touched his aura and stopped, like water hitting an invisible wall, like a sound hitting a vacuum. The conceptual chains dissolved before they could tighten, unraveling into nothing as if they'd never existed at all. It worked. Interesting. The Patriarch's eyes widened in his crow form. Disbelief radiated from every feather, every twitch of his wings. How? Your domain is impressive, Northern said, examining his nails casually, letting the silence stretch. Something that's been passed down for 49 generations, starting from the first Patriarch. Centuries of accumulated experience. Centuries of killing intent. He glanced up. That's not nothing. He looked up properly now. His blue eyes caught the light strangely, reflecting it in ways that seemed slightly wrong, slightly off. But it's still just a domain, and domains have rules. He paused. Break the rules and the domain breaks. He smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who'd already won and was just waiting for the other person to realize it. Want to see what happens when someone who shouldn't exist enters a space designed to define existence? The Patriarch's response was a shriek of pure rage. His form dissolved into a murder of crows, hundreds of them, each one a fragment of his essence. They swarmed Northern from every direction, a black cloud of talons and beaks and death energy. Each crow could attack independently. Each one shared the collective's awareness. Destroy one, and the others continue. Destroy 100, and he'd reform from the survivors. Distributed consciousness, Northern thought, watching the black wave descend. Like a hive mind, but more elegant. That's actually clever, he admitted aloud. Distributed consciousness. No single point of failure. The murder descended, blotting out what little light remained in the dark depths. Northern raised both hands. You're using Sun's legacy Sola Nova. A supernova-level detonation of pure solar fury erupted from Northern's body. A perfect sphere of annihilation expanding outward at impossible speed. The light was blinding. The heat was absolute. The murder of crows hit the expanding wall of light and burned. They evaporated. Shadow made flesh met heat that existed to erase shadow from reality itself. The result was instantaneous and complete, each crow burning away in a flash of solar fury, leaving nothing behind. Not even ash. 90% of the crows ceased to exist in the first second. The remaining 10% scattered desperately, reforming into the obsidian crow 50 feet away. The Patriarch's form was smaller now, diminished, weakened. Patches of his body were translucent, barely holding shape, like a sketch someone had started erasing. He was panting. If a crow could pant. Northern lowered his hands. The light faded, leaving afterimages dancing in the darkness. He looked completely unbothered. Not a single burn mark, not even warmed by the detonation he'd been at the center of. Temperature manipulation is useful like that. You're running out of essence, Northern observed clinically, his voice carrying across the distance with perfect clarity. That last technique cost you, what, 30%? And the reformation probably took another 20. You're operating at half capacity now. He started walking, still on air, each step perfectly level, as if climbing invisible stairs toward his prey. And we both know you can't regenerate properly in your own domain because you're using too much essence to maintain the domain while fighting. Northern's smile grew sharper. You've trapped yourself. The truth of it was almost amusing. The Patriarch had built this perfect hunting ground, this accumulated darkness of 49 generations. And now it was a cage he couldn't escape without abandoning everything. The Patriarch tried to flee. His wings beat frantically, carrying him upward toward the chamber's ceiling. If he could break through, reach open sky, gain space to recover. Northern appeared in front of him, just peered. One moment he was below, the next he was blocking the Patriarch's escape route with his arms crossed. You're using Eclipsing Dread? Eclipse Step. Going somewhere? Northern's hand shot forward. He grabbed the Patriarch's beak, fingers wrapping around it like steel vices. The obsidian crow thrashed immediately, wings beating with desperate fury. His talons raked at Northern's arm, tearing through clothing, scraping against skin with the force of masterwork blades. They left scratches. Just scratches. Northern looked at the shallow marks on his forearm with mild interest. Ha! He actually broke through the reinforcement. That's new. Ha! You actually managed to break skin. Good for you. You're using infinite iteration. The scratches closed. Cells iterated back to their undamaged state. Time rewinding in miniature across his arm. In 2 seconds, his arm was pristine again, like the wounds had never existed. The Patriarch's eyes reflected pure terror now. Northern's grip tightened. The beak, made of materialized essence and death energy, began to crack under the pressure. Hairline fractures spread across its surface. "Let me explain something to you," Northern said. His voice was calm, educational even, which somehow made it worse. "You and I are both paragons. Same rank. Similar soul core development. In theory, we should be relatively equal in a fight." He paused, considering. "Or actually, you should be stronger since you've been a paragon for quite a while and I just became one." "What, yesterday?" He twisted. The beak cracked further, the sound like breaking stone. The Patriarch's shriek was muffled by Northern's grip, but the pain in it was unmistakable. But theory and reality are very different things. Northern swung. He used the Patriarch's own body as a weapon, slamming the massive crow into the ground with enough force to create a crater. Stone shattered beneath them. The impact echoed like thunder through the dark depths, and the entire domain shuddered from the violence of it. The Patriarch tried to dissolve into shadows again, tried to slip away into his element. Northern's other hand pressed against the crow's chest. "You're using Oblivion's mark? Absolute lock." The Patriarch's talent stopped. Just stopped working. The ability to transform, to split, to manipulate shadows, all of it seized up like a frozen machine. Like someone had simply switched off his power at its source. The crow's eyes went wide with panic. "There we go." Northern leaned closer. "From here on out, it's going to be pure despair for you." His voice was still calm, matter of fact, even. "I will make you regret laying a hand on my father. Your supposed greatness? I will reduce it to nothing. I will bring you down to the status of a miner, breaking red rocks in the dark." But his eyes burned with cold fire. "Pray I find my mother alive and well, because if I don't..." Northern's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Then you will wish I had just killed you here." He lifted the Patriarch by the beak again, held him suspended in the air like a caught fish. The massive crow thrashed weakly, and then Northern threw him without any regard for his well-being. The obsidian crow flew like a javelin across the domain. He crashed through several of the wavy stone terrains, each impact sending out shockwaves. Stone exploded outward. He kept going, rolling across the ground at terrible speed, tumbling end over end until he finally crashed into the black plains of the domain with enough force to leave a trench. The domain shuddered. Its carefully cultivated structure began to crack at the seams. Northern walked after him, casual, unhurried. The Patriarch stumbled to his feet in what looked like a massive underground cavern. His crow form was flickering now, shifting between bird and human, unable to maintain stability. Like a dying light bulb, he tried to summon the domain's power again, drawing on the accumulated darkness of generations. Shadows reached for Northern like grasping hands. Death energy coalesced into spears, each one sharp enough to pierce steel. "You're using full impact." Reversal. Every attack reversed mid-flight. The shadows turned on the Patriarch instead, binding his own wings tight against his body. The death energy spears struck him, piercing through feathers and flesh. He screamed. Northern kept walking, his footsteps echoing in the crumbling space. "The funny thing about domains," he said, as if teaching a lesson to a particularly slow student, "is that they're extensions of the owner's will. When the owner's will breaks." He gestured around them. The dark depths was crumbling. Cracks spread across the ceiling like spiderwebs, racing outward from some central point of failure. The accumulated darkness, 49 generations worth of carefully cultivated death energy, was dissipating like morning fog under sunlight. The domain breaks with it. The patriarch collapsed to his knees. His form shifted fully back to human now, naked, bleeding, covered in burns and cuts. His hands were still useless from Northern's earlier strikes, hanging at odd angles. He looked up at Northern with eyes that held no fight left, only fear. Northern stopped in front of him, looked down at this broken thing that had once been the pride of an ancient assassin clan. 49 generations of accumulated power. And it ends like this. He took him by the hair and slapped his face with enough force to send him tumbling. The patriarch rolled across the crumbling plains like a discarded toy, unable to stop himself. By the time he crashed into a stone formation, the domain was already fracturing beyond repair. The entire space shattered like glass. Reality reasserted itself violently. The patriarch's body crashed onto a pillar in the real world, destroying it completely. Stone rained down around them. They were back in the cavern underground beneath the clan's grand palace. The dark depths, 49 generations of work, was gone. Northern exhaled heavily and looked to the side. His clone was bringing his father in his arms. The older man's breathing steady now. At least that's one crisis averted. I've healed him. All should be well from this point on, and hopefully he knows where Mother is. Northern looked at the clone, then at his father cradled in those identical arms. Strange how normal that sight had become. "Let's go up." He put his hands behind his back and walked upstairs, footsteps echoing through the ravaged depths of the Kageyama castle. When they emerged onto the surface of the grand palace, the main floor, Northern found that his clone had been busy. The one he'd sent with Kai had managed to round up almost everything and everyone involved in whatever had torn through the Kageyama clan. "I'm efficient, as expected." The survivors were gathered in clusters, some wounded, others simply shell-shocked. And there, sitting apart from the rest, was a prisoner with ashen hair. He looked broken, beaten down by circumstance, but his eyes held a strange calm nonetheless. Northern's investigating clone glanced up as the other two arrived, then returned his attention to the prisoner. The young man's gaze flickered to the clone behind Northern, the one carrying his father, then snapped back to the Northern seated before him. But we were told, you went to fight. I saw you leave." Northern nodded, settling into a more comfortable position. "Indeed, I went to fight." He tilted his head slightly. "What? Is 3 days not enough?" The man fell silent, conflict dancing across his features. He looked down, jaw working as he processed something. "It's not that. He exhaled slowly. "I never imagined that we wouldn't need to back you up. I thought it was more like you would hold him off for a while, and eventually we would also have to face our fair share of this fate." Despite the scathing wounds across his face, his tone remained fine and refined. Educated, cultured even. Northern laughed shortly, the sound carrying no mockery. "He's not wrong to think that way. I understand why many would think that way. Not that a handful of people understood what I am, after all." Northern shrugged, the gesture casual. "But either way, it all ended well. Not completely well, by the way. The Chaos Prince and Kaal escaped." The prisoner's expression shifted slightly. Northern waved a hand dismissively. "But there's nothing to be concerned about. The next time they decide to show up, I'm sure I would have gotten stronger. More echoes, more forms, stronger. And I will. That's not arrogance, just fact." The man looked at him, clearly confused by half of what Northern had said, but he managed a small laugh and nodded along anyway, pretending to understand. Northern caught it immediately. He always did. "What's your name and how did you end up here?" The man exhaled, shoulders sagging slightly. Right? He looked down, something somber passing over his features. I am Sale of the White String. I'm not sure you saw me, but I saw you in South Drywall when you arrived with the massive airship. He paused, then added with quiet formality. I am an elite of the Therian Citadel. Northern leaned forward slightly, fingers steepling beneath his chin. Then what business brought you all the way from South Drywall to here? Sale answered immediately, his response practiced. We couldn't sit around and do nothing while you were in Stelia holding back the origin. His words dropped as he spoke, almost as if he were checking his own reasoning, doubting it. He started again more firmly. We couldn't sit around and do nothing. The battle between monsters and government forces had drowned each nation in a perimeter of their own. We figured the only thing to do was to break that perimeter and alert the other nations. Northern nodded slowly, piecing it together. A relief force, coordinated across multiple citadels. So you decided to come here. There were other people who went to different nations too. I was just part of the designation to this place. Northern frowned slightly, something not adding up. How? How did you get here with the region of death and monsters swarming the routes? I assume you would have lost almost all your forces trying. Sale looked at Northern intensely, then leaned in, voice dropping to barely a whisper. We discovered an underground channel system. Northern's eyes widened a fraction. Underground channels? That changes everything. But he immediately fixed his expression and whispered back, matching Sale's conspiratorial tone. We'll talk about it later. Sale leaned away, reading the room. Northern did the same, settling back against his seat. A moment passed. Then Northern asked the question that had been gnawing at him since he'd arrived. So, you must know my summons. Abyss Tyrant and Nebulous Lord. Where are they? Sale answered carefully, his voice taking on that noble, measured quality again. The one with the staff was appointed to a different team. The dark and lithe one came with us. He paused, discomfort flickering across his features. However, he suddenly disappeared. At first we thought the Kageyama clan had taken him. After all, something was strange about the way they received us. We decided to search the place but were engaged in battle. At the end of the day, the rest had to prioritize escape. His jaw tightened, and I stayed back to ensure it. Northern rubbed his chin, brows slowly drawing into a tight knot. The pieces weren't fitting together cleanly. Nebulous Lord doesn't just disappear. He's too sharp-witted. If he disappeared, there had to be a reason. Sale added quickly, perhaps sensing Northern's concern. All this happened just 2 days ago. I doubt they would have gotten far, unless they encountered exceptional luck. Northern looked at him, expression sharpening. What about Ryan, the boy who controls ice? Ellis, the boy with dark hair? The girl with white hair? And the rest of the students? Sale responded evenly, professional mask back in place. Everyone joined the 5 groups tasked with carrying this order. Ryan was with us. As for the rest, he hesitated, something apologetic in his tone. Forgive me, their faces are quite prosaic. I cannot place them specifically. Northern exhaled, frustration creeping in at the edges. So you have no idea where Nebulous Lord might have gone. You also know nothing about my mother's whereabouts. But they have to be connected. They have to be. His instincts were screaming at him, that peculiar certainty he'd learned to trust. Something tells me if I find my mother, I will find Nebulous Lord. Kai, who had been standing quietly somewhere behind him this entire time, finally spoke up. If you want, I can take you to the quarters where she and Shin stayed. I also think that's where they were attacked by the elven creatures. Northern turned sharply, every muscle coiling with sudden urgency. Hurry! Northern left with Kai, heading toward the section of the mountain situated behind the main castle, the place where Shin and his wife had stayed for the few weeks they'd been around. Kai explained that they had arrived only 3 weeks ago, and although his father harbored animosity toward Shin, he'd still received them with open hands, albeit with barely concealed hostility. At least until those people came a few days later. He didn't know exactly how they'd reached an agreement, but what he did know was this. The visitors had met only with his father and were hosted in a separate section. No one knew who they were, aside from the fact that they were the patriarch's guests. From what Kai had observed, it seemed like they were negotiating something, and whatever it was, the patriarch wasn't pleased with the terms. Eventually, they appeared to reach some kind of consensus, and that just happened to be when the clan got attacked. Things were put on hold while everyone fought together to destroy the monsters. After the battle, the patriarch grew suspicious of the elven people, claiming they tried to deceive him. Somehow, though, they managed to prove their innocence. Just when things were settling down, the group of humans arrived. With their appearance and the news that the entire continent was under siege, the patriarch made a rash decision, which included fully accepting the alliance with the elven people and settling scores with his brother. He'd drawn Shin into the palace, effectively letting those visitors have their way. Even though Shin had tried to run, the patriarch had bent the entire clan toward finding him, then dragged him down to the depths. This escalation had affected everything. Deaths among the foreign group. Deaths among the knights, friends, people Kai had known. Even one of the Kageyama's direct bloodline had fallen. Then the elven creatures disappeared. So did Northern's mother. So did Nebulous Lord. Northern studied the destroyed wall that led down to a wide yard, surrounded by mountain plains scarred with the evidence of battle. Scorch marks scorched the ground in sweeping arcs and blackened craters. Mother's work. She was proficient with fire, after all. These patterns matched her style, wild but controlled. The signs he followed seemed to mirror Kai's explanation perfectly. Except for one thing. Northern stood at the bottom of a wide cliff, where a massive crater had been torn into the earth. He positioned himself at the crater's edge, looking down into its depth, easily 100 feet, maybe more. The rock at the bottom had been pulverized into fine gravel. Then he tilted his head back, tracing the cliff face upward to its peak. Nebulous Lord. The scale of destruction, the sheer force required to create something like this. There was only one explanation. He was certain of it. Realizing that Nebulous Lord had definitely been with his mother brought a measure of peace to his anxious heart. The void creature was powerful. Perhaps powerful enough to protect her, even against the elves. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He still had to worry about the elves. They were a race he knew almost nothing about. He didn't know the kind of power they possessed or how they wielded it. While he wanted to believe no one could defeat Nebulous Lord, at the end of the day, the creature was just an apex destroyer. And the elves might have something worse. Northern's gaze swept across the devastated landscape one more time, committing every detail to memory. I'll find you. He exhaled slowly and turned back to Kai. Well, thank you for everything. His brows furrowed for a moment. Don't say it. I'm certainly going to remember.
Kellan.
Kellan, right? Kai gave him a blank look. I'm Kai. Northern's mouth opened slightly, mild disappointment flickering across his face. Damn it. Right? Kai. He cleared his throat. I'm going to take it from here. I'd like to take that guy with me. Sail. Kai sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion. My brothers will object. However, if you were to hand over our father, I know you didn't kill him. Northern looked at Kai and laughed. The sound was low, slightly uncomfortable. Wrong somehow. He fixed Kai with a look, his blue eyes cold as winter ice. Listen here, Kai. Perhaps you misunderstood my tone, but I wasn't asking for your permission. The words came out flat, matter of fact. If it takes me burning this place to ash to take that guy with me, I don't mind it. He held Kai's gaze unblinking. Now make a decision. Do you want to build from ash, or can you manage from here on out? Kai was silent, his jaw working as he processed the threat, and the very real possibility that Northern would follow through. Northern nodded once. Thought so. He walked past Kai, and soon both of them arrived back at the main castle building. Master! Master! Knight Chris and Escadar cried out happily as Northern emerged onto the terrace. They were among the new batch of prisoners Northern had commanded the Kageyama clan to release. There were a lot of people here, many of them silent, looking lost, hollow-eyed and uncertain. None of them Northern recognized, and frankly, he wasn't interested. He didn't think he had any right to dictate their freedom beyond opening the cells. That decision depended entirely on the prisoners and the clan themselves. He leaned against the terrace railing and whistled loudly, the sharp sound cutting through the murmur of confused voices. After a moment, a dark storm cloud that had been stationed near the northeast region, where the Black Canyon was, began to move. It rolled closer, growing larger as it approached, thunder rumbling in its depths. Northern glanced at Night Chris. "Help our friend here onto the ship." Jiang stood opposite Northern on the terrace, clenching his fists until his knuckles went white. His expression was caught between too many emotions: disbelief, anger, fear, all warring for dominance. Never in his life had he imagined the white-haired boy standing before him would defeat his father. Father, lost. It made him feel devastated, hopeless. They all were. His sisters stood silent, unable to say anything. Even the 3 siblings who weren't present would have noticed by now, since the domain was gone. They would never have believed their father could be defeated by anyone unconnected to the Riemgard Empire. And it had been Shin's adopted son, of all people. But that was just one of the many surprises this boy had brought with him. Their eyes nearly tore open when they saw the terrifying vessel of flight that descended through a storm of clouds to collect Northern. The ship was massive, easily the size of a small fortress, wreathed in dark clouds and crackling with barely contained lightning. Jiang's thoughts raced, his face going pale. And yet, he fought alone. He had an army that could have destroyed us all, and yet he chose to fight with just 2 knights. His already shocked expression became even more stricken. Bone-deep shock that rattled through him and made his legs weak. The sheer audacity of it. The confidence. What kind of monster did we provoke? With the size of the Thunderhead Dreadnought, it was understandable why battle-oriented minds would naturally assume this was an entire battle fleet. The vessel was built like one, imposing, menacing, bristling with unknown capabilities. Could have been a fleet. But it wasn't. This was just Northern's personal ride. The vessel, surrounded by tenebrous clouds, drifted forward at a peaceful speed, gliding across the bright sky like a ship cutting through calm waters. Northern stood at the edge of the ship's bow, looking down. He wasn't merely inspecting the ground below with his enhanced vision. At the same time, he used Eyes of the Shadow to survey the terrain, searching for whatever clues might lead him to his mother, or anyone. Sale cautiously approached. He stood there, hesitating for a moment, clearly unsure how to address Northern. "Sir, you've been standing there for a while. You should get some rest." Northern answered without shifting his attention, eyes fixed downward as the airship drifted along. "I don't need it." His answer left no room for conversation. Still, Sale seemed desperate. Northern had been standing at the bow for hours, and apparently it bothered the man. Understandable. From his perspective, after standing for so long, one should be exhausted. Of course, Sale couldn't understand that such a thing wouldn't tire Northern out. He judged and empathized from a purely human perspective. The limitations of normalcy. Sale stepped a little closer. "I was 7 when I lost my parents." Northern frowned slightly and glanced back at him. Sale wore a soft smile. "I had gone out with my father on a hunt. I should have stayed back, but I refused. I snuck out and followed him." His voice grew quieter. "We killed a massive monster that day, a hazardous hellion. I remember it well. Would have been a feast for my small clan." He paused. "My father and I came back home to find a flood of bodies." His smile turned wistful, bitter. "I can still remember it. The smell of blood. The morbid sight of their clothes soaked through, eyes wide and glassy, staring at nothing. Staring at me almost like they were cursing me." His jaw tightened. "I dreamt of them for years." Northern raised a brow. "How familiar. Except no one died in my case. But it was a close call for Shin. Wait, now that I think about it, was it a close call for me or for Shin?" He returned his attention to Sale. But your father survived? Sale's smile brightened slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. He died that day too. He was overcome by rage and desperation. Already exhausted, but he sought to avenge his family at any cost. Sale's voice dropped. He died to a mere environmental hazard. A master, for that matter. It was raining, the mountain was slippery. He slipped and tumbled down. I never found his body. Northern's mouth opened slightly. Ah, I see. He offered a small smile. Thank you for the moral support, but I'm not exhausted. I feel rather refreshed, actually. Sale gave Northern a long look. At this point, he'd tried his best. He nodded and was about to step back when Northern's voice stopped him. I'm sorry about your loss. Did you ever find them? The ones who killed your clan? Sale laughed. A dark, satisfied sound. They earned me the title Sale of the White Strings. His expression hardened. Though their organization runs deeper than I realized at the time. Northern nodded slowly. I see. Well, if I'm... He suddenly froze and turned away. Then he leapt off the airship. Sale frowned and immediately followed, manifesting his bow and shooting arrows of light. The arrows flattened and formed glowing platforms beneath his feet, creating steps as he descended. He landed behind Northern moments later. Sir, are you? Northern looked straight ahead. They stood in a dense forest now. The trees were long and thick-trunked but barren, their leaves scarce. The forest floor was more pebbles than grass, though patches of green struggled through in places. The air felt still, felt dead. Around them, deep scratches and gouges marked the tree trunks, suggesting a struggle. It was obvious as Northern examined the area, and even Sale could see it. But could he see this from the sky? Sale found himself wondering about that. Actually, he'd been thinking about it for more than a moment now. It should be damn near impossible to spot such minute details from those heights. Even with enhanced vision, catching something this specific while the airship was moving, inconceivable. Northern touched the gouges on the trees, running his fingers over the cracks where bark had been peeled away, revealing pale wood beneath. He continued walking gently but forward. Then he stopped and looked down. At the base of a particular tree, a dried puddle of crimson stained the ground. Northern squinted at it. Blood. Old, but not that old. At that moment, Sale called his attention to something he'd found nearby. Sir, I think this. He hurried over to Northern. It's a broken chakram. Northern gave the semicircular blade a long look. He took it from Sale, examining the dried blood along its edge. A broken chakram on one end of the scene, a thrashed tree and a puddle of blood on the other. A fight. Someone got hurt. I think. Northern paused, turning the weapon over in his hands. I have a suspicion this could belong to my mother. She used to be very proficient with hula hoops. Sale looked at him, slightly confused. Hula hoop. Ah. It's a kind of fitness activity where you twirl a plastic hoop around your waist. Northern's expression softened. My mother loved it. I introduced it to her, but she beat me at it within seconds. He laughed a little, remembering. Those were good times. Sale nodded, despite not fully understanding. He studied Northern's face. This game sounds interesting. Perhaps I'll ask your mother to show it to me after we find her. Northern laughed. After we find her. Not if. Sale's words were so encouraging, so full of optimism. It helped, lifting the subtle weight of fear from his chest. Fear he hadn't quite acknowledged until now. I like you already. Northern smiled. You can call me Northern. Only people close to me know me by that name. Sale nodded, looking genuinely pleased. Thank you, Sir Northern. He glanced at the broken chakram, then back at Northern. So what do you suggest we do from here? Northern looked straight ahead into the forest depths. The blood doesn't look old. I think from here we should just continue forward on foot. His grip tightened on the chakram. We'll find whoever lost this. Hopefully they're still alive when we do. Sale nodded obediently. They will be. He glanced up at the sky. What about your warship? Northern pointed upward. Oh, that. He waved dismissively. I can just have the ship relay my message to the crew. Sail stared at him, comically shocked. You can do that? Of course. Northern laughed and started forward through the trees. Sail stood there, caught between confusion and disbelief. Northern had to call back to him. What are you doing? Hurry up. Ah, yes. Coming. He followed. The two walked forward for several minutes before reaching a deep lake that flowed directly in front of the cave entrance. The water stretched far across their path. At a glance, impossible to gauge its true width. Northern stared at the cave. Sail did the same. Sir Northern. Just Northern is fine. It feels slightly uncomfortable. Northern exhaled slowly. I'll be 17. In a way. Sail chuckled. Certainly feels more uncomfortable now. Northern sighed and gave him a helpless look. Sail quickly threw his head toward the cave entrance, steering away from the awkward exchange. Either way, I think Lady Luck must have smiled upon us. Northern's gaze remained forward, expression flat and somewhat displeased. Is something wrong, Lord Northern? And he decides to worsen it? Northern glanced at Sail, but his focus returned to the cave entrance, sharpening with intensity. Lady Luck and I don't happen to get along so much. Sail laughed. A genuine, easy sound. Oh no, it's just a... He stopped halfway, catching the blank look on Northern's face. The humor died in the air between them. It seems you are well aware. Sail laughed shyly, scratching along his temple hairline. Northern shook his head and walked forward toward the lake's edge. See you on the other side. You're using Whispering Gale? Wind Embrace. Northern floated along the surface of the water, drifting forward effortlessly. The lake rippled gently beneath him, concentric rings spreading where the tips of his boots skimmed across the glassy surface. The movement was light, almost weightless, like a stone skipping in slow motion. Sail stood frozen, caught between awe and confusion. He'd seen Northern fly when the boy took off toward the air vessel, but witnessing it again this close was different. Humbling. Such strength. If he'd been feeling confident about his own abilities before, that thought evaporated now. And this was merely flight. Northern and a handful of others had dealt with an origin and a tyrant. He gulped. I wonder if he'll help me. I want to become stronger too. Sail wasn't greedy. He understood he couldn't match the boy's strength. Not at this point. But he wanted his own astronomical growth. And he wouldn't mind claiming whatever scraps of knowledge Northern threw his way. For now, though, the moment was wrong to ask. He manifested his woodcrafted bow and shot an arrow forward. A string of light trailed the projectile as it flew across the water and bit into rock on the far shore. Sail gripped the luminous rope and pulled. The thing contracted like rubber, yanking him across the lake's surface in one smooth motion. By the time he landed, Northern was already walking inside the cave, having noted his ability with casual interest. New talent discovered, Celestial Warden. A-class. Do you want a copy? Cost. 6,000 talent fragments. Northern pressed his lips together silently. I'll definitely take that. Both of them entered the cave, Northern casually strolling forward through the darkness, while Sail summoned an arrow of white light to chase away the shadows around him. The luminescence carved a small sphere of visibility, but beyond it, the blackness pressed in thick and absolute. This level of darkness, even though it's daylight outside. Sail's voice dropped low. Isn't that concerning? Northern took a moment before responding, his tone measured. Seems like whoever left the blood there found themselves in a difficult situation. He sighed and stopped walking. Sail, trailing behind, also stopped. He looked at Northern with slight confusion, silently wondering why the sudden halt. Northern breathed calmly, his eyes fixed ahead despite the absolute darkness. Well, the good news is, they're alive. 3 of them. He paused. The bad news is, they're cornered by a devilish destroyer. Sail looked around, squinting into the shadows. He tried to focus, attempting to discern how exactly Northern could tell all that. The darkness revealed nothing to his senses. Ah, I see. He leaned slightly closer. If you don't mind me asking, Lord Northern, just how many talents do you have? You can fly, and you also possess an amazing level of spatial awareness. Northern counted on his fingers with the methodical patience of someone performing inventory. 13. With yours, soon 14. Sale exhaled and laughed awkwardly. The sound strained. 13. Ah? Aha! He stepped forward, his arrow of white light pushing back the darkness around him. Is it all right if I deal with the devilish destroyer? Northern observed him carefully. He doesn't believe me? It was actually somewhat surprising. Northern had reached the point where he felt there was no need to hide his special ability anymore. After all, knowing wouldn't save anyone from whatever fate awaited them, not even Origins. He was strong enough to protect himself now. So it was baffling and slightly frustrating when he stated the truth plainly and Sale didn't believe him. Then again, he couldn't blame the man. Anyone who believed a drifter possessed 13 talents without proof, well, they'd either be foolish or remarkably trusting. There was no middle ground. Northern studied the Arrow Sage with a slightly worried expression, practical concerns overtaking his brief annoyance. Are you in shape for that? If I recall correctly, it's only been a few days since your battle at the Kageyama clan. Sale dismissed the arrow with a flick of his wrist and rolled his shoulders experimentally. The movement seemed smooth enough. Don't worry about me, Sir Northern. You focus on securing the people. His jaw set with determination. I'll figure out how to deal with the monster. I need this darkness training anyway. Northern still observed him, concerned and slightly skeptical. You do? Yes. Sale's answer came firm and immediate. The major reason I lost my battle with one of the Kageyama was purely because of darkness. I'm blind in it. Northern raised his chin slightly and nodded, understanding settling into place. Ah, I see. He paused thoughtfully for a moment, an idea forming. Then he opened his palm, shadows gathering there like smoke coalescing into substance. You're using Eclipsing Dread, Supreme Shadow. You have a bow, don't you? Sale responded, confused by the sudden shift. Yes, I do. Summon it. Sale hesitantly manifested his bow, living with grain visible even in the dim light, and handed it to Northern. Northern examined it for several moments, turning it over with analytical focus. Analyzing entity. Brown Moon bow data complete. Form available for copying. Yeah, copy it. That was a bonus, honestly. The real reason Northern needed to examine the bow was to analyze and understand how the crafting worked, the structure, the essence flow, the balance points. Because we have limited time, Northern said, already working. I'll give you a prototype. The supreme shadow in his palm swirled with sudden speed, shifting and sharpening as it expanded. The darkness itself seemed to fold, taking shape according to his will and understanding. All Northern did was command the supreme shadow to assume the form of a bow based on his analysis. And it obeyed. The shadow formed into a bow that seemed to merge with the surrounding darkness, a weapon carved from absence itself. Sale couldn't even see it properly, just the vague suggestion of a shape darker than the shadows around it. Northern extended the shadow bow toward him. Here, feed it your essence. Sale looked at Northern, surprise and confusion warring across his features. But he did as asked, reaching out to grasp the weapon. The moment his fingers closed around it, an essence flowed into the form. His eyes widened, then trembled. Northern frowned slightly, noting the reaction. What? This is... Sale's voice shook. A heroic rank? Where did you get it? Northern's gaze narrowed in genuine confusion. I never had it. I just created it. Sale looked like he'd just seen a ghost, or something equally impossible.